Found his birth records tracked down. Mom knew exactly who he was targeting when he showed up 10 years ago demanding money. Which meant when he seduced Emily when he started that affair, he knew. He knew she was his half-sister. He'd done it on purpose. I stumbled back to my desk, grabbed my phone with hands that still trembled, and called Dad. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice weak and rough. "Rachel." "Dad." I could barely get the words out. "Jake found out. Nathan is Mom's biological son, from the foster home. Emily's been sleeping with her half-brother." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, "I know." My legs gave out. I sat down hard in my chair. "You know," Nathan told her, 2 days before the wedding. The world stopped spinning. He told her he sent Emily copies of his birth certificate and DNA test results. Showed her exactly who he is, who Mom is, what their relationship meant. Dad's voice cracked. "That's why she looked so destroyed in all those pre-wedding photos everyone thought were just nerves. She wasn't nervous, Rachel. She was in shock. Horrified. She wanted to call the whole thing off. But she didn't. Your mother convinced her not to." The bitterness in his voice was acid. "Said it was too late to back out. Too many guests, too much money spent, too much at stake with Andrew's arrangement. Told Emily that Nathan was lying, trying to manipulate her, that there was no proof, that no one would ever know." And Emily believed her. She wanted to believe her, because the alternative was accepting that she'd been sleeping with her own brother, that the man she'd been intimate with for months shared her blood. That's too much for anyone to carry, so she chose the easier lie. I sat there in my cubicle, surrounded by the mundane trappings of my ordinary job, and felt the full weight of Nathan's revenge settle over me. He didn't seduce my sister for love. He didn't do it for money or leverage or any practical reason. He did it for the one thing my mother had never given him: revenge. I spent the rest of that day at work in a fog, mechanically completing tasks, while my mind kept circling back to the same horrifying thought. Nathan had orchestrated an incestuous relationship with his own half-sister, as the ultimate revenge against the mother who'd given him up. It was calculated cruelty on a level I couldn't fully comprehend. 3 days after the wedding, I received an email that made everything worse. The sender was nathanpierce.consulting@gmail. Comrades, subject line, "We should talk." I stared at it for a full minute before opening it, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Ms. Morrison, I know you sent the videos to Andrew. Clever move. But you don't understand the full picture. Your mother isn't the only one with secrets. I have documentation of your involvement in several financial irregularities at your firm. At least that's what it'll look like when I'm done. Back off, or I'll make sure you lose more than your family. You'll lose your career, your reputation, everything. Think carefully. N." My hands were shaking as I read it twice, then a third time. He was threatening me. Threatening to frame me for financial crimes I hadn't committed. And if Nathan was half as good at manipulation as he'd proven to be, he could probably make it stick. I immediately logged into my work computer and started checking files. Everything looked intact. My audit reports, my client files, my documented analysis of the fraud alert I'd seen about Andrew's company. All there, all exactly as I'd left them, except when I went to pull up that fraud alert again to screenshot it as evidence, it was gone. Completely deleted from the system. I sat back, ice flooding my veins. That alert had been automatically generated by our financial monitoring software. It shouldn't be possible to delete it without administrator access, and a very good reason. I picked up my desk phone and called IT. "Hey, this is Rachel Morrison in Financial Analysis. I need to ask about system access. Who has the ability to delete fraud alerts from the monitoring system?" The IT tech, someone named Brad, who I'd worked with on a few technical issues, sounded confused. "Only system administrators, or someone with administrative credentials. Why?" "There was a fraud alert on my dashboard 3 days ago. Now it's gone." I heard typing on his end. "Hang on, let me check the logs." More typing. Then silence. "That's weird." "What's weird?" There was a remote login to your account 2 days ago. Tuesday night around 11 p.m., from an external IP address. The login credentials were yours, but the access point was... This doesn't make sense. You weren't logged in from home. My mouth went dry. I was asleep at 11 p.m. on Tuesday. I haven't logged in remotely in weeks. Then someone has your password. His voice shifted, became more serious. Rachel, I need to file a security incident report. If someone's accessing your account without authorization, that's a major breach. File it. And Brad, can you pull the cached version of that fraud alert? It was about Chen Investment Group. I can try. Give me an hour. I hung up and stared at my computer screen. Nathan was framing me, making it look like I'd deleted evidence to protect Andrew, or worse, that I was somehow involved in the money laundering myself. If anyone investigated my account activity, they'd see my credentials accessing the system and removing incriminating evidence. I spent the next 6 hours in a state of controlled panic, methodically backing up everything I had. I uploaded Dad's USB drive videos to 3 different encrypted cloud services, scanned and saved every page of the credit card fraud documentation, saved Jake's entire PI report on Nathan, including the DNA results and foster care records, screenshot every threatening email, every text from family members, every piece of the puzzle I'd assembled over the past weeks. I found a service that offered timed release of encrypted files. If I didn't log in every 24 hours, everything would automatically send to a pre-programmed list of recipients. I added the FBI, the SEC, the IRS, and 3 major news outlets. Brad came through with a cached copy of the fraud alert. I saved that too. Then I went to the FBI's website and filled out their online tip form for financial crimes. I attached the fraud alert about Andrew's company. I included details about Nathan's consulting fees that matched the pattern of structured money laundering. I didn't mention the family connection, didn't bring up the blackmail or the identity theft or any of the personal aspects. Just the financial crimes. Clean, professional, documented. Let them investigate from that angle first. I hit submit at 9 p.m., then went home and poured myself a glass of wine with hands that still wouldn't stop shaking. The FBI called at 3 a.m. I fumbled for my phone in the dark, saw the DC area code, almost let it go to voicemail before something made me answer. Is this Rachel Morrison? A woman's voice, professional and alert despite the hour. Yes. This is Special Agent Jennifer Okoye with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. I apologize for the late hour, but your tip came through flagged as high priority. We need to talk. I sat up, turned on my bedside lamp. Okay. We received your submission about Chen Investment Group and Nathan Pierce. I need to inform you that we've been investigating Mr. Chen and his associate for approximately 3 months. Your evidence, particularly the fraud alert documentation and the pattern analysis you provided, has significantly accelerated our timeline. 3 months. They'd been watching Andrew and Nathan for 3 months, which meant they'd been investigating before the wedding was even planned. We'd like you to come in for a formal interview tomorrow. Well, today, technically. Can you make it to our field office by 10 a.m.? Yes. Good. And Ms. Morrison, this is very important. Don't contact any family members about this conversation. Several of them are persons of interest in our investigation. After she hung up, I sat in my dark bedroom clutching my phone and realized what I'd done. If Nathan wanted a war, he'd just picked the wrong accountant. But I was about to learn that everyone I loved was already on the battlefield. I didn't sleep after Agent Okoye's call. I showered, dressed in my most professional suit, and arrived at the FBI field office 45 minutes early. The building was gray concrete and tinted windows, the kind of place designed to be intimidating. It worked. Agent Okoye met me in the lobby at exactly 10 a.m. She was younger than I'd expected from her voice, maybe 40, with close-cropped hair and an expression that gave nothing away. She led me through security down a hallway that smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee, and into a small interview room with a table, 3 chairs, and a recording device. Thank you for coming in, Ms. Morrison. She sat across from me, opened a thick file folder. I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you some detailed questions about your family's financial history. I knotted my throat too tight to speak. You submitted evidence about identity theft committed by your mother. Credit cards opened in your name when you were a minor. She pulled out bank statements, the pages worn from handling. These are joint account statements for your parents, Linda and Robert Morrison. The credit card payments, the ones made in your name before your mother stopped paying 3 years ago, they all came from this account. She spread the statements across the table. I could see the highlighted entries, payment after payment, to credit card companies I'd never done business with. And there, on check after check, were 2 signatures. My mother's careful script, and my father's messier scrawl. Your father's signature is on many of these checks, at least 40% of them over the 15-year period. I felt like I'd been hit in the chest. But he told me he only found out recently, that he started documenting things a year ago. Agent Okoye's expression softened slightly. Your father may have started actively documenting a year ago, but he knew about the credit card fraud for 15 years. He signed the checks. Whether he was an active participant or just went along with what your mother told him to do legally, it doesn't matter. He enabled this fraud. He's complicit. The room felt too small, too hot. Dad had known. Not for 1 year, for 15. He'd been writing checks in my name since I was 16 years old, and he'd never said a word. Agent Okoye slid another document across the table. Did you ever apply for a small business loan in 2019? I looked up, trying to focus through the ringing in my ears. No. I've worked at my firm since 2017. I don't have a business. Someone used your social security number and identity to secure a $30,000 small business loan from Capital One for a company called Morrison Media Solutions. The loan was approved in March 2019 and defaulted after 6 months when no payments were made. My hands started shaking. I remembered March 2019. I'd been working on a major audit, pulling 60-hour weeks. I'd been promoted to senior analyst that spring. I'd been building my career legitimately while someone was using my name to commit fraud. We traced the bank account where the loan money was deposited. Agent Okoye's voice was careful, measured. It belongs to your sister, Emily Morrison. The air left my lungs. Emily took out a loan in my name. Yes, she created the business entity, used your personal information, including your SSN, forged your signature on the application. The loan was spent over 6 months on personal expenses, rent, shopping, restaurants. Then she simply stopped responding to payment requests. Emily hadn't just benefited from Mom's fraud. She'd committed her own, actively, deliberately, while I was working myself to exhaustion to build something real. Agent Okoye leaned forward. I know this is hard, but I need you to understand the full scope of what we're looking at. Your mother committed identity theft against you for 19 years. Your father aided and abetted that theft for 15 years. Your sister committed loan fraud. Andrew Chen and Nathan Pierce have been laundering money through fake consulting fees. This isn't one bad actor making poor choices. This is a conspiracy involving multiple parties, multiple crimes, spanning nearly 2 decades. My voice came out hollow, distant. What happens now? We're building a case. It'll take a few months to compile everything, to follow the money trails, to document the conspiracy. We'll need you to testify, likely in front of a grand jury first, then potentially at trial. She paused. Ms. Morrison, you should prepare yourself. When this goes public, when arrests are made, your family will likely blame you. In our experience, they always do. The person who tells the truth becomes the villain in their narrative. I thought about Mom's phone call after the wedding, about the texts from relatives I barely knew, about Emily's Instagram post painting herself as the victim. Agent Okoye was right. They'd already started building that narrative. I left the FBI office 2 hours later, my head spinning with information I couldn't fully process. I sat in my car in the parking lot and realized I needed to hear it from Dad. I needed him to look me in the eye and admit what he'd done. I called Agent Okoye's cell. Can you make sure my mother and Emily aren't home? I need to talk to my father alone. Consider it done. 40 minutes later, I pulled up to my childhood home. Mom's car was gone. Emily's too. Just Dad's truck in the driveway. I found him in his recliner oxygen tank hissing softly beside him. He looked worse than he had a week ago, his skin grayer, his breathing more labored. But when he saw me walk in, he knew immediately. "They told you." I sat on the couch across from him. "You signed the checks. For 15 years. His eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I should have stopped her years ago. But I loved her. And I was weak. And I told myself it would all work out somehow." I pulled out my phone. "Dad, I need to record this. I need you to tell the truth. On record. All of it." He looked at the phone in my hand, then back at my face. "If I do this, your mother will never forgive me." My voice broke. "She stole my identity. Emily stole my name. You let them do it for years. There's nothing left to forgive." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Turn it on." I hit record. For the next 20 minutes, Dad confessed everything. The credit cards he knew about, the checks he signed without asking questions. The business loan Emily had bragged about at a family dinner, how she'd winked and said she'd used creative financing. The payments to Nathan he'd watched Mom make from their joint account for years before he finally followed her and found out why. The wedding arrangement, the money laundering, all of it. I cried silently while I recorded tears running down my face, but I didn't stop the recording. This was too important. This was the truth, finally unfiltered and undeniable. When he was done, his voice barely above a whisper, he looked at me with eyes that held more pain than I'd ever seen. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that someone in this family finally chose you." I stopped the recording and sat there in the living room where I'd spent my childhood feeling invisible. If they'd wanted silence, they should have killed the truth years ago. Instead, they just killed my ability to care what they thought. Agent Okoye called the next morning while I was drinking coffee and staring at the recording of Dad's confession on my phone, trying to decide what to do with it. "Ms. Morrison, we're ready to move. We have enough evidence to secure warrants for all parties involved, but we need your testimony to be completely airtight. Are you willing to cooperate fully with our investigation?" I set down my coffee cup. "Yes. Even if it means your mother and sister face prison time." I closed my eyes. Saw Mom's face when she told me I was uninvited from the wedding. Saw Emily's smirk as Mom gave me the ultimatum at that family dinner. Saw 19 years of credit card statements with my name on debt I'd never created. "Yes. What about your father? He's complicit in the identity theft, but he's also dying. The DA might be willing to show leniency if he cooperates given his terminal diagnosis." "He already recorded a full confession, yesterday. I'm sending it to you now." I forwarded the audio file. Heard Agent Okoye's keyboard clicking as she opened it. Silence while she listened to at least part of it. Then, "Ms. Morrison, this is extraordinarily comprehensive. Your father documented everything. The credit cards, the business loan, the payments to Nathan, the wedding arrangement. Did he record this recently?" "Yesterday afternoon. This changes our timeline significantly. Stand by." That night, I was heating up leftover takeout when an email arrived from Dad. The subject line made my chest tighten. "Final insurance." I sat down at my kitchen table and opened it. "Rachel, by the time you read this, I'll have told your mother what I did. She'll be furious, but I'm dying anyway, and I'd rather die knowing I did one right thing. Attached is every recording I've made over the past 6 months. Conversations with your mother, with Nathan, with Emily, even one with Andrew at a barbecue where he explained the whole laundering setup after too many beers. I've been documenting everything since I got my cancer diagnosis. I knew I wouldn't be here to protect you from what comes after, so I built you a paper trail instead. Use it. Save yourself. I'm sorry I didn't save you sooner. I love you. Dad." The attachment was a compressed folder. I downloaded it with shaking hands. 47 audio files, each one meticulously labeled with date, participant's location, and a brief summary of content. I opened the first one randomly. March 15th. Linda and Nathan. Coffee shop. Blackmail payment discussion. I clicked play. Heard Mom's voice, strained and tired. "This is the last time, Nathan. I can't keep doing this." Nathan's response was cold. "You'll keep doing it as long as I say so, unless you want Emily to know the truth about who I really am." I went through file after file. Mom admitting to the identity theft, saying she'd had no choice, that she needed the money, and I'd never know. Emily laughing about the business loan, telling Mom she'd used my information because Rachel's credit is perfect and mine is shit. Nathan making explicit threats about exposing the foster home pregnancy. Andrew drunk at a Memorial Day barbecue, explaining to Dad how he was moving money through Nathan's consulting fees to avoid federal reporting thresholds. It was a complete archive of their conspiracy, documented in their own words by a dying man who'd finally decided the truth mattered more than the peace. I forwarded everything to Agent Okoye at 11 p.m. She called at 7 the next morning. "Your father's recordings are prosecutor's gold. We have clear admissions of guilt, evidence of ongoing conspiracy, documented threats. The DA has reviewed everything and wants to move forward with arrests." When 48 hours. We're coordinating with IRS for the tax violations and SEC for the securities fraud aspects of the money laundering. This is going to be a multi-agency operation. She paused. "Ms. Morrison, I need to warn you about what's coming. When we execute these warrants, it's going to be very public. We're talking about multiple arrests, significant white-collar crimes, and the domestic angle will make it irresistible to media. Mother stealing from daughter, sister, betraying sister, wedding scandal, money laundering. This is going to be a feeding frenzy." "I understand. Are you absolutely sure you want to proceed? Once we move, there's no going back." I thought about 35 years of being erased from family photos, of being blamed for things I didn't do while Emily was praised for things she didn't earn, of Mom's cold voice telling me the wedding would be perfect without me, of discovering my credit destroyed my identity, stolen my name, used for fraud I'd never committed. I'm sure. At 3 a.m, 2 days later, my phone rang. I knew who it was before I looked at the screen. "Mom," I answered without saying anything. She was screaming before I could even bring the phone fully to my ear. "Your father betrayed us. He's been recording everything. Private conversations. He sent files to the FBI. He told me everything tonight, that you reported us, that he helped you, that he's been documenting us for months. How could you do this? How could he?" I kept my voice level, calm, almost conversational. "How could I, Mom? You stole my identity when I was 16 years old. You destroyed my credit for 19 years. Emily took out a $30,000 loan in my name. You all lied to me, manipulated me, used me as collateral for your criminal conspiracy for decades. The question isn't how could I, it's how could you? We're family, family protects each other." "No." My voice was steady, final. "You're criminals who happen to share my DNA. That's not family, that's just biology." Her voice went from hysteria to something colder, more dangerous. "You'll regret this. When Emily and I are in prison, when your father dies alone because you destroyed this family, you'll regret every choice you made. Everyone will know what you did. Everyone will know you're the one who turned on your own mother and sister." "The only thing I regret," I said quietly, "is not doing this sooner." I hung up. My father didn't just hand me evidence. He handed me his redemption, and it was soaked in everyone else's guilt. After Mom's call, I couldn't go back to sleep. I stayed up watching the sky lighten outside my window, thinking about what was coming in the next 48 hours. Arrests, media coverage, the complete destruction of whatever family I'd thought I had. I called in sick to work. I couldn't focus on spreadsheets when my entire world was about to implode. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, organizing all the evidence one more time, making sure everything was backed up and documented and ready for whatever came next. Around 2 in the afternoon, my doorbell rang. Insistent, aggressive, the kind of ringing that said someone wasn't going away. I checked the peephole and saw Emily. She looked terrible. Hair uncombed, pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup. Eyes red and swollen like she'd been crying for hours. She was wearing sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, nothing like the polished image she usually presented to the world. I opened the door but left the chain on. "What do you want? We need to talk." Her voice was raw, desperate. "Please, Rachel, just 5 minutes." She didn't look manipulative. She looked broken. Against my better judgment, I unhooked the chain and let her in. She walked into my living room and started pacing, immediately couldn't seem to stand still. "Mom told me the FBI is coming, that you turned us in, that Dad's been recording everything and gave it all to you." "He did." Emily spun around to face me. "Why, we're your family. How could you do this to us?" I laughed, and the sound was bitter enough to make her flinch. "You took out a $30,000 loan in my name, Emily. You committed fraud using my identity. You knew about the credit cards Mom opened when I was 16. You participated in this conspiracy for years. Don't you dare talk to me about family." I was desperate. Her voice rose defensive. "My job doesn't pay enough. I had debt from that fake degree which I only got because Mom pressured me to compete with you. You were always the smart one, the successful one. I had to fake it just to keep up. So that justifies stealing from me." Her tactics shifted immediately, her voice softening, eyes filling with tears. "If I go to prison, Rachel, I can't. I won't survive it. You don't know what it's like to be the disappointment, to always be in your shadow. You were always Dad's favorite, always the one who did everything right. I was just trying to survive being compared to you my entire life." I cut her off before she could finish the manipulation. Don't you dare try to make yourself the victim when you're literally a criminal who used my name to commit fraud. I'm not falling for that anymore." Her expression hardened, tears disappearing as quickly as they'd appeared. "If you testify against me, I'll make sure everyone knows you're the one who destroyed this family. Every relative, every friend, everyone in this town will know you turned on your own mother and sister. You'll be a pariah." "They already think that," I said calmly. "Mom made sure of it." We stared at each other across my living room, and I made a decision. She deserved to know at least one truth. "You know who you were sleeping with, right, Nathan?" Emily flinched like I'd slapped her. "He told me he's Mom's son." "I know, it's disgusting. I didn't know at first, and when I found out I wanted to die, but Mom said he was lying, that there was no proof." "Did you know Nathan seduced you on purpose, that it wasn't an accident or attraction? He did it for revenge against Mom. You were a pawn in his game, Emily, a way to hurt her and control Andrew at the same time." Her face started to crumble. "No. He told me he loved me. He said—" I pulled up Jake's PI report on my laptop, turned it around so she could see. "He tracked you for months before your first accidental meeting. He researched your routines, your favorite coffee shop, your schedule. He knew exactly where you'd be and when. It was all calculated." I watched her read through the evidence, watched her hands start to shake, watched the color drain from her face as she realized the full extent of how she'd been used. She barely made it to my kitchen sink before she vomited. I got her a glass of water and a towel. She rinsed her mouth, leaned against my counter, looking like she might collapse. After a long silence, I asked quietly, "Did Mom know that Nathan was using you?" Emily's voice came out hollow, dead. "She knew. She told me to keep him happy. Said if Nathan was occupied with me distracted, he wouldn't demand more money from her as often. She literally told me to sleep with him to save her money." She looked up at me, and the pain in her eyes was raw and real. "She pimped me out to her own son, my half-brother, to save herself a few $1,000s. We stood there in my kitchen, my sister and I, with the full weight of what our mother had done settling between us like poison. Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "If I cooperate with the FBI, if I testify against Mom and Nathan, will my sentence be lighter?" Probably. You're 28 first offense. If you cooperate fully, maybe probation or minimal jail time instead of years in prison. And if I don't, you go down with everyone else. Emily stood up slowly, straightened her hoodie. I need to think. She walked to my door, put her hand on the knob, then turned back. You were right. About everything. About Mom, about Nathan, about all of it. I wish I'd been brave enough to see it sooner. She left. I stood in my apartment alone, and in the silence that followed, I heard what I'd been waiting for my whole life. Truth. Emily left around 3 in the afternoon. I spent the rest of that day and night in a state of suspended waiting, knowing the arrests were coming, but not knowing exactly when. Agent Okoye had said 48 hours. That deadline was approaching fast. My doorbell rang at 5 in the morning. I stumbled out of bed disoriented and checked the peephole. Emily stood there with a rolling suitcase and a woman in a business suit I didn't recognize. I opened the door. What? I'm doing it. Emily's voice was steady, resolved. I'm cooperating. This is Patricia Chen, the lawyer I hired last night. We're going to the FBI field office at 9. I wanted to tell you first. I stared at her, still half asleep, trying to process. You're turning yourself in. Before they come for me. Patricia says it looks better, shows remorse and willingness to cooperate. Emily took a shaky breath. I'm going to tell them everything. About Mom, about Nathan, about the loan, all of it. I can't protect her anymore. Not after what she did to me. To us. The lawyer Patricia handed me her card. Ms. Morrison, I'll be in touch. Your sister's cooperation will likely be beneficial to the prosecution's case against the other defendants. They left. I stood in my doorway watching them walk down the hallway, Emily pulling her suitcase behind her like she was going on a trip instead of turning herself in to federal authorities. An hour later, the raids began. I was at my desk at work by 6:30, unable to sleep when my phone started buzzing with news alerts. I pulled up the local news station's website and saw the live coverage. 3 simultaneous FBI raids, cameras already positioned at each location like someone had tipped off the media, which I realized they probably had. Maximum public impact on white-collar crime. Andrew's penthouse downtown was first on the split screen. Agents in FBI windbreakers escorting him out in handcuffs, his hair disheveled, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. He was already on his phone despite the cuffs, probably calling his lawyer. His expression was cold, controlled even now, calculating his next move. Nathan's apartment was chaos. The footage showed him fighting the agents, having to be physically restrained by 3 men while he screamed about his rights, about illegal search and seizure, about police brutality. They practically carried him to the unmarked car. But it was the 3rd location that made my chest tighten. Mom and Dad's house. The house I grew up in. Mom was led out in her bathrobe, hair wild, mascara from yesterday smeared down her face. She was screaming at the agents, hysterical, her voice shrill enough to carry across the lawn to the news cameras. Dad stood in the doorway behind her oxygen tank at his side, watching it all unfold with an expression I couldn't read from the grainy footage. He didn't try to help her. He just watched. Emily wasn't there. Because Emily was already at the FBI field office with her lawyer making her deal. Agent Okoye called me at 9:15. Your sister is here. She walked in voluntarily with counsel. She's giving a full statement right now implicating Nathan Pierce and your mother in conspiracy, fraud, blackmail, and money laundering facilitation. She's providing details about the loan fraud she committed using your identity. What happens to her? DA is offering a plea deal. Guilty plea to loan fraud. Full restitution to you for the $30,000 plus interest, 2 years probation. 200 hours community service, mandatory financial counseling. No jail time. And my mother. Your mother is looking at 5 to 10 years for identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. Nathan and Andrew are facing federal charges for money laundering and wire fraud. They're each looking at 15 to 20 years. By noon, the story had gone national. I watched it spread across the internet like wildfire. Family fraud ring, busted mother stole daughter's identity, sister helped. Wedding slap bride arrested in FBI fraud sweep. FBI breaks up multi-million-dollar money laundering operation hidden behind society wedding. My name was in every article. Rachel Morrison, 35 senior financial analyst, helped FBI build case against her own family. Whistleblower, victim. Depending on which outlet you read, I was either a hero or a traitor. My LinkedIn exploded with messages. Half of them supportive, calling me brave, saying I'd done the right thing. Half of them vicious, calling me a family traitor, saying I'd destroyed people's lives out of jealousy and spite. My work phone rang constantly. Reporters trying to reach me, distant relatives wanting to know if the stories were true, colleagues asking if I was okay. My boss called me into his office at 2 p.m. He looked uncomfortable, caught between professional concern and corporate liability. "Rachel, I need to ask you directly. Are you implicated in any of these charges?" "No, I'm the victim and the whistleblower. The FBI has all my evidence showing I was defrauded by my own family members." His shoulders relaxed. "Good. Because we're getting calls. Media wants interviews. Do not, under any circumstances, talk to them without clearing it through our legal department first. Understood?" Understood. And that evening, while I was microwaving dinner, I had no appetite for Mom's lawyer released a statement to the press. I read it on my phone standing in my kitchen and felt nothing. Mrs. Linda Morrison is a loving mother who made financial mistakes during difficult times. She deeply regrets any harm caused to her family. However, she maintains that her daughter Rachel has grossly mischaracterized events due to long-standing family estrangement and jealousy toward her younger sister. Mrs. Morrison looks forward to the opportunity to clear her name in court and restore the truth. I actually laughed. Even from jail, even with 47 audio recordings of her own voice admitting to everything, even with bank statements and forged signatures and documented evidence, Mom was still gaslighting, still trying to reshape reality to fit her narrative. But this time, there was evidence. Recordings, documents, paper trails that couldn't be explained away or reframed or blamed on my jealousy. The gaslighting wouldn't work anymore. Justice is quieter than people think. It doesn't roar. It just locks the door behind the guilty. 3 days after the arrests, I got a call from a hospice facility I didn't recognize. Dad had been moved there the day Mom was taken into custody. His health had collapsed without her there to manage his medications, to schedule his appointments, to maintain the illusion that everything was fine. I drove there immediately. The hospice was quiet, sterile, filled with that particular smell of disinfectant, trying to mask something sadder underneath. Dad's room was at the end of a long hallway. When I walked in, he was so still I thought for a moment I was too late. But then his eyes opened when I took his hand. "Rachel." My name came out barely above a whisper, his voice ravaged by whatever the morphine and the disease were doing to him. "I'm here, Dad." His fingers tightened weakly around mine. "Did it work? The recordings?" I nodded, tears already blurring my vision. "They're all arrested. Mom, Nathan, Andrew. Emily's cooperating. You did it. You saved me." A smile crossed his face, weak, but genuine. "I should have saved you 35 years ago." "You saved me when it mattered." "Your mother." He paused, breathing labored. "She's going to hate me. Even after I'm gone. She'll never forgive me." "I know. But I won't hate you. I'll remember that when it counted, you chose truth over keeping the peace. That matters." His hand squeezed mine with surprising strength. "Be happy, sweetheart. Don't let them poison your whole life. Promise me." I was crying openly now. "I promise. I'm proud of you." Those were his last words. He died that night with me holding his hand, and I felt the exact moment he left, felt the absence of him settle into the room like silence after music ends. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at my apartment forwarded through my lawyer. Prison mail she'd noted on the attached message from Andrew Chen. I almost threw it away without reading it. but curiosity won. "Ms. Morrison, I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm cooperating with the FBI too. I'm telling them everything about Nathan's operation, the money laundering structures, the offshore accounts, all of it. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life, marrying into a criminal conspiracy I thought I could control. I was wrong. Nathan played all of us, me included. I'm not innocent, but I'm not going down alone. And for what it's worth, your sister didn't know the full extent of what your mother and Nathan were doing. She was a victim of their manipulation too, in her own way. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth. AC." I set the letter down and didn't know how to feel. Andrew was still a criminal. He'd still been laundering money, still been part of the conspiracy. But he was right that Nathan had manipulated everyone, that we'd all been pieces in a game we didn't fully understand. Emily's plea hearing was scheduled for early November. I almost didn't go, told myself I didn't need to see it, that her consequences weren't my responsibility to witness. But at the last minute I drove to the courthouse and slipped into the back of the gallery. Emily stood before the judge in a simple gray dress, her hair pulled back in a low ponytail, no makeup, nothing like the polished bride from the viral video that still played on loop across the internet. She looked small, young, frightened. When the judge asked how she pleaded to the charge of loan fraud, her voice shook but stayed clear. "Guilty, Your Honor. I take full responsibility for my actions. I knew what I was doing was wrong. I victimized my sister, who never did anything but try to warn me. I'm sorry." The judge looked at her over his reading glasses. "Do you have anything else you'd like to say before I impose sentence?" Emily turned, scanned the gallery, and found my eyes. "I spent my whole life trying to be my mother's favorite. I became a fraud in every sense of the word. I'm done lying." The judge sentenced her to 3 years probation, $35,000 in restitution to me, 300 hours of community service, and mandatory financial counseling. No jail time. Emily's shoulders shook with relief as the bailiff led her away from the podium. In the hallway afterward, while I was trying to leave without being noticed, she approached me. "Thank you for not asking for harsher punishment. The prosecutor said you could have." I met her eyes. "I didn't want you in prison. I wanted you to face what you did. There's a difference." We didn't hug. We barely knew how to stand near each other anymore. But she nodded. "I know. And I will." The first restitution payment arrived in December. $500, the beginning of what would be years of monthly payments until Emily paid back what she'd stolen, plus interest. I held the check in my hands, staring at it. I could deposit it, use it to help repair my credit to offset the damage her fraud had caused. I was entitled to it. The court had said so. But something about keeping it felt wrong. Felt like accepting blood money, like profiting from the destruction of my family, even though I hadn't caused that destruction. I researched organizations that helped victims of family financial abuse and identity theft. Found one with good ratings, a clear mission, real impact. I endorsed the check over to them and mailed it that day. Every month when Emily's payment arrived, I would do the same thing. Turn her restitution into help for people trapped in situations like the one I'd barely escaped. I posted about it on my private social media, the account only close friends could see. Turning pain into purpose, one payment at a time. Maybe revenge was just justice wearing makeup. Or maybe justice was just revenge that filled out the right forms. Emily's probation officer assigned her to a domestic violence shelter for her 300 hours of community service. I only knew this because Emily started sending me monthly update emails, which her probation terms apparently required, as part of her accountability to her victim. The first one arrived in January, brief and awkward. Started at the shelter today. Met a woman whose husband stole her identity to open credit cards in her name. Told her about the resources you use to fix your credit. Felt like I was looking in a mirror of who I hurt. I didn't respond, just read it and filed it away. The second came in February. Running a financial literacy workshop for survivors every Thursday. Teaching them how to check their credit reports, how to spot fraud, how to freeze their credit. It's the least I can do. Again, I didn't respond. but I read every word. March, April, May. The emails kept coming, each one a little longer, a little more detailed about the work she was doing, about the women she was meeting, the stories that mirrored pieces of what our family had been. I never replied, but I never deleted them either. 6 months into her probation in June, Emily sent an email that was different, longer, more raw. My therapist helped me realize something I've been avoiding my whole life. I was abused too. Not physically, but emotionally, psychologically. Mom trained me from the time I could talk, to lie, to cheat, to value how things looked over what they actually were. She told me when I was 5 years old that pretty girls don't need to be smart, they just need to be loved. She made me feel like I was worthless unless I was her golden child, her perfect daughter, her project. I became her doll, her accomplice, her proof that she'd done something right even though everything in her life had gone wrong. I'm not excusing what I did to you. I own that completely. But I'm starting to understand why I became someone capable of stealing from my own sister. Why I thought it was okay to use your name, your credit, your identity. Because Mom taught me that nothing mattered except survival and appearance. I'm sorry. You deserved a real sister. I'm trying to become one even if it's too late. I read that email 3 times, cried the 3rd time through, then closed it without responding. In July, I made a decision I couldn't fully explain even to myself. I called the shelter where Emily was serving her hours and asked if they needed volunteers for their weekend program. They did. They always did. I showed up on a Saturday morning, signed in with a volunteer coordinator who didn't know my connection to Emily and was assigned to help with intake paperwork for new residents. The coordinator mentioned that another volunteer ran financial workshops on Saturdays, but she was in a different part of the building. I saw Emily through a doorway around 11 a.m. She was sitting at a table with 3 women, their heads bent over papers that looked like credit reports. Emily was explaining something, her finger pointing at a line on one woman's document. She was wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt with the shelter's logo on it. Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup that I could see. She looked completely different from the woman in the wedding dress from the polished golden child who'd spent 28 years performing perfection. One of the women asked her a question and Emily answered patiently. Then she said something that made me stop in the hallway, made me lean against the wall to listen. I stole my sister's identity because I was too afraid to build my own. I didn't think I was capable of being anything real, so I borrowed her realness, her legitimacy, her good name. Don't be like me. Your name is yours. Your credit is yours. Your identity is yours. Protect it. Build on it. Own it. The women nodded, taking notes, and Emily continued explaining how to dispute fraudulent accounts, how to file police reports, how to rebuild when someone you trusted destroyed what you'd built. She was good at this, patient, clear, honest about her own conviction about what she'd done and why it was wrong. She didn't hide behind excuses or try to minimize her crime. She owned it, used it, turned it into something that might help someone else avoid the trap she'd fallen into. For the first time since we were children, Emily looked real, not polished, not performing, not trying to be anyone's favorite, just real. I left without approaching her, signed out with the coordinator, drove home in silence. That night, sitting in my apartment with Dad's watch on my wrist, I picked up my phone and texted Emily for the first time since the arrests. Saw you at the shelter today. You were good with them. Keep doing that. Her response came within seconds, like she'd been waiting for any sign that I still existed in her world. You were there. Why didn't you say hi? Wasn't ready. I understand. Thank you for watching, though. It means more than you know. I stared at my phone for a long time before typing my next message. You're becoming the person you pretended to be. Keep going. I will, I promise. I set my phone down and looked at the photo I'd taken from the estate sale, the one of Dad and me at my college graduation. The only picture where we both looked genuinely happy, where I wasn't on the edge of the frame or cropped half out of existence. Emily had spent 28 years being Mom's favorite, the golden child, the one who mattered. And it had turned her into a fraud in every sense of the word. Now, stripped of that role, forced to face what she'd done and who she'd become, she was finally building something real. For the first time, she didn't look like Mom's favorite. She looked like mine might have been, if we'd ever had the chance. Mom's trial happened in August, 4 months after the arrests. Unlike Emily's quick plea deal, Mom had insisted on fighting the charges, convinced somehow that she could explain her way out of 19 years of documented fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank statements, forged signatures, credit card applications with my information on them opened when I was 16, 17, 18. Dad's recordings where she admitted everything. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. I sat in the gallery for the sentencing hearing in the back row where I could see without being seen. Mom stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit, her hair graying at the roots now that she couldn't maintain the dye job she'd kept for decades. She looked smaller, somehow diminished. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses, asked if Mom had anything to say before sentence was imposed. Mom turned and looked directly at me. I felt the weight of her gaze, that familiar mixture of disappointment and accusation I'd lived with my entire life. I did what I had to do to survive. I made hard choices that my daughter will never understand because she's never had to make them. She never had to give up a child. She never had to raise daughters alone when her husband was too weak to fight for his family. She never had to deal with blackmail from the past. She'll never understand sacrifice. No apology, no remorse. Just justification, just the same narrative she'd been spinning my entire life, where everything she did was necessary, and everything I felt about it was wrong. The judge's expression didn't change, but her voice when she spoke was cold as winter. "Mrs. Morrison, you victimized your own daughter for 19 years. You stole her identity when she was a child and destroyed her financial future. The child you gave up for adoption was indeed tragic. But the children you kept deserved better than what you gave them. 7 years in federal prison." 2 months later, I received a visitor request form in the mail. Linda Morrison was requesting that I be added to her approved visitor list. I stared at that form for weeks, threw it away twice, retrieved it from the trash both times. Finally, on a cold October morning, I drove to the federal correctional facility where Mom was serving her sentence. The visiting room was exactly like every prison movie I'd ever seen. Plexiglass barriers, phones to talk through, guards watching from the corners. I sat down in the hard plastic chair and picked up the phone. Mom picked up hers on the other side. She spoke first, her voice distorted slightly through the phone line. "I knew you'd come eventually. You always need closure." I didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I came to ask one question. Do you feel any remorse for what you did to me?" Mom leaned back in her chair, and I saw something like amusement flicker across her face. "Do I regret stealing your identity? Yes. Do I regret making hard choices to survive? No. You have no idea what it's like to be truly desperate, Rachel. You've never had to. You were desperate 19 years ago when Dad lost his job. I understand that, even if I don't forgive it. But why did you keep using those cards until 3 years ago, long after the desperation ended?" Her jaw tightened. "Because I could. Because you were ungrateful and had everything come easy to you. Because from the day you were old enough to think for yourself, you looked at me with judgment. You made me feel like a failure just by existing the way you did." The truth, finally. Not dressed up in justifications about survival or sacrifice, just the raw, ugly reality. So it was punishment for being born different than Emily. You ruined everything by being you. I stared at my mother through the scratched plexiglass, at this woman who'd given birth to me, raised me, fed me, clothed me, and fundamentally resented my existence because I refused to be what she needed me to be. She was broken. Damaged by her own trauma, twisted by years of protecting herself at everyone else's expense. And I couldn't fix her. I'd spent 35 years trying, and it had nearly destroyed me too. I took a breath and said the thing I'd come to say. "I forgive you anyway. Not because you deserve it. but because I deserve peace." Mom scoffed, the sound harsh through the phone. "You don't mean that." I stood up, still holding the phone. "I do mean it. I forgive you for being a damaged person who damaged me. But I'll never forget what you did, and I'll never see you again." Her expression shifted, panic replacing the cold superiority. "You can't just leave Rachel sit down. We're not done. You left me emotionally 35 years ago. I'm just making it official now." I hung up the phone. Behind the glass, Mom was screaming, her mouth moving in words I couldn't hear and didn't want to. Guards were moving toward her. I walked out of that visiting room, through the security checkpoints, into the parking lot where my car waited. I didn't look back. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter I knew I'd never send. "Dear Mom, you wanted me to be different, quieter, more compliant, more like Emily. But I was born honest in a house of liars, and that was my original sin. I spent 35 years trying to earn love from someone incapable of giving it. I'm done. You can spend your 7 years however you want. I'll spend mine building the life you tried to steal. I hope someday in some way you find peace with what you did, but I'm not waiting for it anymore. Your daughter, but not really Rachel." I folded it carefully, put it in an envelope, tucked it in the back of my desk drawer, where I kept things I needed to write but didn't need to send. The act of writing it was enough. Peace didn't feel like victory. It felt like finally exhaling after holding your breath for 35 years. The notification from the probate lawyer arrived in November, 6 months after Dad died. Reading of Last Will and Testament of Robert Morrison, printed in formal legal letterhead. I almost threw it away. Dad had died with nothing, or so I'd thought. The house had been sold to pay legal fees and restitution. His medical bills had eaten through their savings. Mom was in prison. What could possibly be left to distribute? But curiosity made me go. The lawyer's office was downtown, all dark wood and leather chairs, the kind of place that smelled like old money and older secrets. I walked into the conference room and found Emily already sitting there, hands folded in her lap. She looked up, gave me a small, uncertain nod. I nodded back and sat 3 chairs away. A screen had been set up at the head of the table. Mom's face appeared on it, pixelated and harsh in the fluorescent lighting of whatever prison video call room she was in. She didn't acknowledge either of us, just stared straight ahead with that same cold expression I'd seen through the plexiglass. The lawyer, an older man with silver hair and reading glasses, opened a folder and began. "I, Robert Morrison, being of sound mind despite failing body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, executed on June 15th of this year." 2 months before he died. When he'd already been recording everything, already been building the case that would destroy his wife and save his daughter. "To my wife, Linda, I leave 30% of my estate. This represents the legal minimum I am required to leave to a surviving spouse. Despite everything that has passed between us, we shared 40 years of life together, and that deserves acknowledgement." Mom's face on the screen remained impassive. "To my daughter, Emily, I leave 10% of my estate with the hope and prayer that she will use it to build something real, something honest, something that belongs to her alone." Emily's breath hitched. I heard her suppress a sob. "To my daughter, Rachel, I leave 60% of my estate and my deepest apologies for not protecting her sooner." I sat up straighter, confused. What estate? The house was sold. Everything was gone. The lawyer looked at me over his glasses. "Your father had a life insurance policy through his former employer, $500,000. He changed the beneficiary distribution 3 months before his death. He also maintained a small pension and a savings account in his name, only that your mother didn't have access to. Total estate value after debts and expenses, $627,000. The room tilted. I gripped the arms of my chair. Mom's voice came through the screen speakers, sharp and furious. "He can't do that. I'm his wife. That money should be mine." The lawyer didn't even look at her. "He can and did, Mrs. Morrison. The will is legally valid and was executed while your husband was of sound mind. The distribution stands. Your father also left a letter," he continued, pulling an envelope from the folder, "to be read aloud at this meeting." He opened it and began to read in that same measured lawyer voice, but the words were Dad's unmistakably his. "To my family. I spent 40 years staying silent. I enabled abuse, fraud, and cruelty because I was too weak to fight, too afraid to lose what little peace we had. But in my final months, I chose differently. Rachel, the money is yours because you earned it by surviving us. Use it for therapy, for freedom, for joy, for whatever you need to build the life we tried to take from you. Emily, your portion comes with a condition. You must continue counseling and community service beyond what the court required. Prove that you've changed. Prove that you can be better than we taught you to be. Linda, you get the legal minimum because I loved who you were before trauma broke you, but I cannot reward who you became. To anyone who thinks Rachel destroyed this family by telling the truth, you're wrong. The family was destroyed the day we chose lies over love. Rachel just refused to live in the rubble. Robert Morrison." The lawyer folded the letter. The room was completely silent except for Emily's quiet crying. Mom's screen had gone black. She'd disconnected. I sat there unable to move, unable to process what I'd just heard. After taxes and legal fees, my portion came to $376,200. I sat with that number for a week, staring at the bank statement, trying to decide what it meant, what to do with it. Finally, I made a list. The same way I'd always solved problems. Breaking them down into manageable pieces. $50,000 to pay off every dollar of the credit card debt from Mom's identity theft. My credit would finally be clean. $30,000 to reimburse my own depleted savings, the money I'd spent on lawyers and investigators and the chaos of the last year. $100,000 split between the National Domestic Violence Hotline and the Identity Theft Resource Center. Organizations that helped people like me. $50,000 into a trust for Emily, earmarked specifically for therapy and education, with a stipulation that she had to complete a real degree honestly earned to access it. The remaining $146,200 stayed in my account. Emergency fund, retirement, freedom, proof that I'd survived and come out the other side with something solid to stand on. I posted about it on Facebook on the private account where only real friends could see. My father's final gift wasn't money. It was permission to stop carrying guilt that wasn't mine, using his legacy to help others do the same. Even broken men can leave something unbroken behind. He left me proof that I was worth saving. The media attention started almost immediately after the inheritance became public record. My inbox filled with requests from journalists, podcasters, documentary filmmakers, all wanting to tell my story in their own words. One email stood out from a popular true crime podcast called Family Sins. The host wrote, "We're covering your family's case for our next series. We'd love to include your perspective to ensure accuracy and fairness." I looked up their previous episodes. Sensationalized titles, dramatic music, episodes that focused more on speculation and family drama than on the actual crimes or the victims. Comments sections full of people debating whether the subjects were heroes or villains, brave or vindictive, justified or just bitter. I replied with one sentence, "My story isn't entertainment." They ran the episode anyway, 2 weeks later. The sister who sent her family to prison, justice or revenge. I listened to the first 10 minutes. They'd gotten half the facts wrong, filled in gaps with speculation, and framed the entire narrative around whether I'd been right to report my own family. The host's voice dripped with false concern, as she wondered aloud if there had been other options I could have explored before destroying my mother and sister's lives. The comments section was exactly what I'd expected. Half the listeners called me brave, a survivor, and inspiration. The other half called me vindictive, jealous, a family traitor who'd gone too far. I closed the browser after the first page. I knew my truth. I didn't need strangers on the internet to validate it or condemn it. A month later, I received a different kind of invitation. AARP was hosting a financial security conference focused on elder abuse and family financial fraud. They wanted me to speak on a panel about identity theft within families. I almost declined that one too. But something about the audience demographic, mostly women in their 50s through 70s, made me reconsider. These were people who understood family loyalty, who'd been raised to protect family at all costs, who might be sitting on their own secrets about financial abuse they'd suffered or witnessed. I accepted. The conference was in a hotel ballroom in downtown Chicago. I sat on a panel with 2 other speakers, a financial advisor and a victim's advocate, and when it was my turn to speak, I looked out at 200 faces and told the truth. My mother stole my identity when I was 16 years old. She opened credit cards in my name, used them for 19 years, and destroyed my credit before I even knew what credit was. I didn't discover it until I was 35 and tried to refinance my home. For 19 years, I had no idea. I saw heads nodding, women leaning forward in their seats. Financial abuse in families is hidden because we're taught from birth that family means loyalty, that blood is thicker than water, that you protect your own no matter what. But loyalty without honesty is just complicity. It's enabling abuse and calling it love. I paused. If someone is using your name, your credit, your identity, even if it's your parent or your sibling or your spouse, you have the right to protect yourself. You have the right to tell the truth. And anyone who says otherwise is asking you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. The applause was loud and long. Several women were crying. After the panel ended, I was gathering my things when a young woman approached me. Late 20s, red-rimmed eyes, hands clutching a wadded tissue. "Ms. Morrison, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need help." We moved to a quiet corner of the hotel lobby. I bought us both coffee, and for the next 2 hours, she told me her story. Her mother had opened credit cards in her name when she was 18. She'd just discovered it $30,000 in debt she'd never created. Her mother was begging her not to report it, crying, saying it would destroy the family, that she'd go to prison, that everyone would blame her daughter for being cruel and unforgiving. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "She's my mom." I gave her the number for legal aid, walked her through how to file a police report, how to freeze her credit, how to dispute the fraudulent accounts. I told her what I wished someone had told me decades ago. Your mother made a choice when she stole your identity. You're making a different choice now by protecting yourself. Let them underestimate your strength. Let them call you whatever names make them feel better about their own complicity. You'll survive this. And one day you'll realize that losing people who only loved you when you stayed silent wasn't actually a loss at all. She hugged me before she left, thanked me through tears, promised to follow through. 6 months later, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. "Ms. Morrison, I'm the woman you helped at the AARP conference in Chicago. I wanted you to know I did it. I filed the police report. I disputed the accounts. My credit is being repaired. My family hates me. My mother won't speak to me. But I can sleep at night now. I can look at myself in the mirror. Thank you for showing me it was possible." I read that email 3 times, then saved it in a folder I labeled Proof. The media requests kept coming. News outlets offering money for exclusive interviews. A publisher wanting me to write a book promising a substantial advance. A streaming service interested in developing my story into a limited series. I declined every single one. Instead, I had my lawyer release one brief statement to the press. I spoke up because staying silent was killing me. I encourage anyone experiencing financial abuse within their family to seek help from professionals and law enforcement. But my story is mine, not content to be packaged and sold. I'm returning to my private life. I deactivated Facebook and Instagram, kept only my LinkedIn set to private professional contacts only. I changed my phone number, giving the new one to only a handful of people I actually trusted. I put my condo on this market and bought a smaller place across town, a fresh start in a building where none of my neighbors would recognize my name or my face. I reclaimed my anonymity piece by piece. That young woman from Chicago, the one who'd approached me with tears in her eyes and terror in her voice, she'd smiled at me when we said goodbye. A small, uncertain smile, but real. She smiled the way I used to right before I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I returned to work in January, 3 months after the trials ended, and 2 months after I'd moved into my new apartment. I'd taken extended leave during the worst of it, using vacation days and unpaid time off to deal with legal proceedings and media chaos. Now it was time to step back into my regular life to see if I still had a place in the world I'd built before everything exploded. I was terrified walking into the office that first morning, terrified that my colleagues would look at me differently, that clients would request different analysts, that the firm would find some polite way to ease me out because my personal drama had become too public, too messy, too much of a liability. My boss, Stephen, called a team meeting at 9 a.m. The entire financial analysis department, 23 people, crammed into the conference room. I stood in the back, ready to slip out if this turned into some kind of intervention or gentle termination. Stephen stood at the front of the room and cleared his throat. I want to address something before we dive into quarterly planning. As you all know, Rachel Morrison has been dealing with a significant personal situation that became very public. I want to make something absolutely clear to everyone in this room and everyone in this company. My stomach dropped. Here it came. Rachel showed incredible integrity by reporting financial fraud, even when that fraud was committed by her own family members. She followed the law. She protected herself. She cooperated with federal authorities to stop criminal activity. She is exactly the kind of professional we want representing this firm. He looked directly at me. Rachel embodies everything we claim to value: honesty, accountability, and the courage to do the right thing, even when it costs you personally. She's an example of what we should all aspire to be. The room erupted in applause. Not polite golf clapping, but genuine sustained applause. People were nodding, some were standing. I felt tears burning in my eyes and blinked them back hard. After the meeting, as people filed out, Jennifer from the audit team pulled me aside. She was in her early 40s, someone I'd worked with on several projects but didn't know well personally. Rachel, I need to tell you something. My uncle stole my identity when I was 23. Opened credit cards, took out a car loan, destroyed my credit. I found out when I tried to buy my first house. She paused, her voice dropping. I never reported it. My family begged me not to. They said it would destroy him, that I'd be breaking up the family, that I was young and could rebuild my credit, but he was older and couldn't survive prison. So I didn't report it. I just paid off his debt and fixed my credit over 10 years. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I regret it every single day. You were brave. You did what I couldn't do. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about that. I hugged her, this colleague I barely knew, and felt something shift inside me. I'd been so afraid that telling the truth would destroy my professional reputation, that people would see me as vindictive or damaged or too much trouble. But my reputation wasn't built on keeping family secrets. It was built on being good at my job, on being honest, on following through. The truth hadn't destroyed my career. If anything, it had validated it. 3 months later, in April, Stephen called me into his office. I went with the same low-level anxiety I always felt with unexpected summons, but he was smiling when I walked in. Close the door, Rachel. Have a seat. I sat. The board approved my recommendation this morning. We're promoting you to finance director. You'll be overseeing the entire analysis division, managing 15 analysts and reporting directly to me. 20% salary increase, full benefits package, corner office on the 14th floor. I stared at him, unable to process the words. I don't understand. You're the best analyst we have. You've been carrying this department for years, and you've shown exactly the kind of judgment and integrity we need in leadership. He slid a folder across his desk. The official announcement goes out Monday. Congratulations. The company president made a statement at the all-hands meeting that Friday. Rachel Morrison has been promoted to finance director. In her 8 years with this firm, she has exemplified our core values of integrity and accountability. We're fortunate to have her leadership. Standing there accepting congratulations from colleagues, shaking hands with executives I'd only seen from a distance, I felt something I'd never fully felt before in my 36 years. Pride. Not the defensive pride of surviving despite my family, not the bitter pride of proving them wrong. Just clean, genuine pride in something I'd built honestly on my own merit, with my own hands and my own mind. My first act as finance director was proposing enhanced fraud detection protocols. Systems that would flag suspicious transactions earlier, protect our clients from both external threats and internal theft. I presented the proposal to the board with data case studies and a detailed implementation plan. They approved it unanimously. But success didn't erase grief. It just gave it a different backdrop. One night in May, I was packing for a work trip when I found a box of old photos I'd somehow missed in my move. I sat on my bedroom floor and went through them, and there it was buried near the bottom. A photo from the beach. I was 8 years old, gap-toothed and sunburned, building a sandcastle with a red plastic bucket. Emily was 5, chasing waves in her floaties. Mom was laughing, actually laughing, her hair blowing in the wind. Dad had his arm around her shoulders. We all looked genuinely happy. This was before everything. Before the first credit card was opened in my name. Before the lies compounded into an architecture of fraud. Before Nathan found Mom and the blackmail started. Before Emily learned that appearance mattered more than truth. Before Dad decided silence was easier than confrontation. I held that photo and cried for the family that could have existed. For the mother who could have asked for help instead of stealing from her child. For the father who could have spoken up sooner before the damage became irreparable. For the sister who could have been raised to value honesty instead of performance. For the childhood I could have had if the adults in my life had made different choices. The grief was real and valid and necessary. Even though I'd done the right thing, even though I'd saved myself, I was still allowed to mourn what never was and never would be. I'd started therapy in March. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, was in her 50s, calm and direct in a way that felt safe. We'd been meeting weekly, working through the complex tangle of emotions that came with destroying your family to save yourself. In one session in late May, she asked me a question I'd been avoiding. Do you regret reporting them? I sat with it for a long time, really thinking instead of giving the answer I thought I should give. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my mother chose fraud over asking for help when my father lost his job. I regret that she kept choosing fraud for 19 years, long after the initial desperation ended. I regret that Emily was raised to value appearance over authenticity, that she learned to lie before she learned to stand on her own. I regret that Dad stayed silent for 35 years before his cancer diagnosis finally gave him the courage to act. I paused. But do I regret telling the truth? No. I regret that the truth was so painful for everyone involved. I regret that it required destroying relationships that were already broken, but looked intact from the outside. But I don't regret speaking the truth itself. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. That's growth, Rachel. Being able to hold two truths simultaneously. I did the right thing, and it still hurt. Both of those things can be true at once. Most people struggle with that nuance. They want it to be all good or all bad, completely right or completely wrong. But real life is more complicated than that. It is. I agreed. How do you feel now compared to when you first came to see me? I thought about the question carefully. Lighter. Not happy exactly, but lighter. Like I've been carrying something heavy for so long that I didn't even realize how much it weighed until I finally set it down. I still have bad days. I still have moments where I wonder if I could have done something differently, something that would have saved everyone. But those moments are getting rarer, and I'm sleeping through the night now. That's something. That is something, Dr. Chen said. In June, the company held a recognition ceremony for promoted employees. I stood on a small stage in the banquet hall of a nice hotel, accepted a plaque and a handshake from the CEO, and looked out at a room full of colleagues who'd chosen to show up on a Friday evening to celebrate people they worked with. The applause was modest. No standing ovation, no dramatic moment. Just genuine, sustained clapping from people who respected the work I'd done and the integrity I'd maintained even when it cost me everything. The applause wasn't loud, it was honest, and that made all the difference. I spent that summer settling into my new role as finance director, building my team, implementing the fraud detection systems I'd designed. Work became a rhythm. I could count on a structure that made sense when so much else in my life had been chaos and rubble. In August, I decided it was time to clean out my storage unit. I'd been paying for it for 3 years. A 10 by 10 space filled with boxes from my divorce, from my old apartment, from various stages of my life I'd never fully processed. It felt right somehow to finally go through it all, to decide what was worth keeping and what needed to be released. Most of it was junk. Old textbooks from college, kitchen appliances I'd replaced years ago, holiday decorations I'd never used. I filled a donation truck with most of it, threw away the rest, until only 3 boxes remained. The last one was labeled Rachel's Room in handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened it carefully, expecting childhood memorabilia from the estate sale. Inside were random items that must have been swept from my old bedroom after the house sold. A trophy from middle school debate, a yearbook, a framed photo of me at my college graduation that had somehow survived, and an envelope. It was addressed to me in Mom's handwriting. My old address, the apartment I'd lived in before I bought my condo. There was a stamp in the corner, but it had never been postmarked, never sent. I turned it over and saw the return address, my childhood home. The envelope was thick, heavy. I knew what it was before I opened it. The wedding invitation. Elegant cream cardstock with embossed lettering. Emily Morrison and Andrew Chen request the honor of your presence at their wedding ceremony. The date that never happened, at least not the way they'd planned. But tucked inside the formal invitation was a handwritten note on Mom's personal stationery. I recognized the paper, the same set she'd used for years, her initials monogrammed at the top. Rachel, I know we haven't been close lately, but Emily really wants you there. Please come. We can try to be a family again. Love, Mom. The date at the top of the note was 4 months before the wedding, before I'd discovered the credit card fraud, before I'd found out about Andrew's lawsuit, before I'd sent that anonymous email, before everything exploded. Mom had written this note, had addressed the envelope, had stamped it, had intended to send it, and then she'd changed her mind. I stood there in the storage unit holding this artifact from a timeline that no longer existed, from a version of events that never came to pass. If she'd sent it, would I have gone? Would I have smiled through the ceremony, ignorant of the conspiracy unfolding around me? Would I have kept living in that alternate reality, where I didn't know about the identity theft, the blackmail, the money laundering, the affair? Would that have been better? Easier? I looked at Mom's handwriting, at that word love that she'd written but never meant, not really. Not in any way that mattered. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even disappointment. Just a strange, distant recognition that this piece of paper represented a choice she'd made. To exclude me, to protect her secrets, to keep me away because the truth I represented was too dangerous to her carefully constructed lies. I drove home with the invitation on my passenger seat. That evening, I built a fire in my fireplace, even though it was August and warm outside. I held the invitation, the note, the envelope, and watched them catch flame. The cream cardstock curled and blackened. Mom's handwriting disappeared into ash. The embossed letters melted away. And I watched it all burn, feeling lighter with every second. This is what could have been, I thought. The wedding I wasn't invited to, the family I could have kept pretending with, the lies I could have kept living. But what actually exists now is so much better. Truth had burned away all the pretty lies, all the polished surfaces, all the performance. And what was left was real. Messy and painful and complicated, but real. I let the fire die down, swept the ashes into the trash, and felt something close in my chest. Some door I'd been holding open, finally swinging shut. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my journal and wrote a letter I knew I'd never send, could never send because the recipient was a ghost. Dear 16-year-old Rachel, right now, someone who should protect you is stealing from you. Your mother is opening credit cards in your name, forging your signature, using your identity to fund a life you'll never benefit from. It will hurt for a very long time. You'll spend 19 years not knowing, walking around with this wound you can't see or name. Then you'll spend 3 more years fighting to make people believe you, to prove that you're the victim, not the villain. You'll lose your family. You'll watch them turn on you, blame you, paint you as jealous and vindictive. You'll become a stranger in your own story. But here's what you'll gain, and this is important, so listen carefully. You'll gain your integrity, your strength, your voice, and a life where you never have to wonder if love is real or if it's just performance, because you'll learn to give that love to yourself. The truth will set you free, but first it will burn everything down. Everything you thought was solid will turn to ash. Let it burn. Don't try to save what was never real to begin with. Let it burn because you're fireproof. You always were. You just didn't know it yet. Love 36-year-old Rachel, who finally believes she's enough. I closed my journal and put it on the shelf next to Dad's watch, these 2 artifacts of the person I'd become. The next day was August 15th, 1 year since Dad died. I drove to the cemetery early before the heat became unbearable. Found his grave under a maple tree, the headstone simple granite with his name, his dates, and the words, "He chose truth," that I'd requested. I placed flowers at the base, yellow roses, because they'd been his favorite. Sat on the grass beside him, even though it was slightly damp from morning dew. "Hey, Dad, it's been a year." A bird sang somewhere above me. The cemetery was quiet except for the distant sound of a lawnmower. "I'm doing okay. Better than okay, actually. I used the money you left to build something real. Paid off all the fraudulent debt, cleared my credit, donated to organizations that help people like me. And I kept enough to feel secure to know I'll be okay no matter what happens. Emily's doing better, too. She finished her community service last month. She's enrolled at community college now, working on getting an actual degree this time. She sends me updates sometimes. We're not close, but we're honest. That's something." I pulled up a blade of grass, rolled it between my fingers. "Mom, I don't know. I haven't spoken to her since that prison visit. She has 5 more years. Maybe she'll find some peace in there. Maybe she'll finally face what she did." But I stopped waiting for her to give me closure. I gave it to myself. I touched the headstone, felt the warmth of the granite in the morning sun. "You asked me to be happy. That last night in hospice you made me promise. I'm working on it. Some days are really hard. I still have moments where I miss having a family, where I see other people with their parents and siblings and feel this ache for something I never really had. But then I remember that I have me. And I'm learning that's enough. More than enough." I stood up, brushed grass from my pants. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer, my colleague who'd become a real friend. "Dinner tonight. There's this new Thai place we have to try." I typed back, "Absolutely." I looked at Dad's grave one more time. "Thank you for choosing me at the end, for the recordings, for the will, for finally standing up. I know it was hard. I know it cost you, but it saved me." I walked back to my car, got in, started the engine. The sun was fully up now, bright and warm. I had a whole day ahead of me. Errands to run, a meeting with my team on Monday to prepare for, dinner with a friend tonight. A life that was mine, built on honest ground. As I drove away from the cemetery, I thought about that wedding I wasn't invited to. The ceremony that imploded. The viral video. The arrests. The trials. Everything that had happened in the year since. I wasn't at my sister's wedding, but I stood for everything that mattered after. Truth doesn't destroy, it reveals. And what it revealed was that I was always strong enough. I just needed to stop asking permission to prove it. And that's Rachel's story. A story about a woman who spent 35 years trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. A woman who discovered that her own mother had stolen her identity, that her sister had betrayed her trust, that her entire family had turned her into collateral for their crimes. But more importantly, it's a story about what happened when she finally said enough. Rachel wasn't at her sister's wedding, but she stood for everything that mattered after. She stood for truth. She stood for accountability. She stood for the idea that family shouldn't mean accepting abuse, that loyalty shouldn't mean staying silent, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who only want you when you're convenient. I want to ask you something, and I really want to hear your thoughts on this. Was Rachel right to report her family to the FBI? Some people say she was brave, that she did what needed to be done. Others say she went too far, that family should protect family no matter what. What do you think? Would you have made the same choice in her position? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'm genuinely curious where you stand on this. And here's another question that I think is worth considering. Rachel's mother said something at her sentencing that stuck with me. She said Rachel didn't understand sacrifice, that she'd never had to make the hard choices that her mother made. Do you think there's any truth to that? Or was that just another manipulation? Can desperation ever justify stealing from your own child? I'd love to hear your perspective. You know what strikes me most about Rachel's story is that she didn't get the Hollywood ending. Her mother never apologized. Her family never had that tearful reconciliation. But she got something better. She got peace. She got freedom. She got a life built on honest ground instead of pretty lies. And sometimes that's the real victory. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to Rachel's story. Stories like this matter because they remind us that we're not alone. If you've ever felt like the scapegoat in your family, if you've ever been blamed for telling the truth, if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself, you're not alone. There are thousands of us out there, and your story matters too. If Rachel's journey resonated with you, if you found yourself thinking about your own family dynamics or your own hard choices, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. This channel is dedicated to telling stories about real people facing real situations, stories about courage and consequence, and what it really means to stand up for yourself. We share new stories every week, and I promise you each one will make you think, make you feel, and maybe even make you see your own life a little differently. And if you want to support someone in your life who's going through something similar, who's being pressured to stay silent about abuse or fraud or betrayal because of family loyalty, share this video with them. Let them know they're not crazy. Let them know that choosing themselves doesn't make them selfish. Let them know that truth is worth the cost. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Mine was served at 200 degrees in front of 200 wedding guests and 10 million people online. My name is Rachel, and I'm about to tell you how I watched my entire family implode in real time and smiled while doing it. 3 months ago, I discovered my name had been erased from my sister Emily's wedding guest list. Not because we had a fight, not because of some petty drama, but because I'd become a liability. You see, I'd stumbled onto something they desperately needed to hide. When I called my mother to ask why I wasn't invited, her response was ice cold, "The day will be perfect without you." I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Because I'm a financial analyst and I've spent my entire career finding what people try to hide. And what I'd found about my sister's perfect fiancé, about my mother's secrets, about the web of lies holding this wedding together, it was explosive. So I made a choice. I'd let them have their perfect day. But the truth would attend in my place. 4 hours into the reception, a video started circulating. The groom, my sister. A slap that echoed through a crystal ballroom and across the entire internet. Within an hour, it had 10 million views. The hashtag wedding slap was trending worldwide. My phone rang. Mom, sobbing. "Please, Rachel, you have to help us. This is a nightmare." I laughed, because only I knew the real reason he slapped her. And before this story ends, you're going to know too. Trust me when I say nothing about this wedding was what it seemed. And the slap, that was just the beginning. My name is Rachel Morrison. I'm 35 years old, a senior financial analyst at one of the city's most respected firms, and I've spent the last 2 years rebuilding my life after a divorce that taught me more about my own strength than 10 years of marriage ever did. I live alone in a condo I bought with my own money, in a neighborhood I chose for myself, surrounded by a life I built from scratch. I thought I'd finally learned to stop seeking approval from people who would never give it. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday evening when I made the mistake of checking my sister Emily's wedding website for what I told myself would be the last time. I'd been doing this for weeks, refreshing the page like some kind of addict, even though I knew it was pathetic. Even though I knew I should just close my laptop and pour myself a glass of wine and pretend I didn't care that my baby sister was getting married and I'd barely heard a word about it. The website was one of those elegant, minimalist affairs with a soft pink color scheme and scripted fonts that probably cost someone a small fortune to design. There was a countdown timer at the top, 63 days until the big day. Below that, a photo that made my chest tighten every time I saw it. Mom, Dad Emily and her fiancé Andrew all laughing at some private joke I'd never be part of. They looked like something out of a magazine spread, the perfect family. I scrolled down to the guest list section even though I knew what I'd find. Or rather, what I wouldn't find. Every name was there. Every single person Emily had ever known, apparently. Her college roommate who moved to Seattle 5 years ago. The neighbors from 3 houses down who she'd maybe spoken to twice. Her co-worker's husband. Extended relatives I'd forgotten existed. 214 confirmed guests, their names displayed in neat alphabetical order. My name wasn't among them. I'd checked last week and it had been there. Rachel Morrison +1. I'd stared at that +1 for a long time, wondering who on earth I'd bring since my ex-husband was obviously out of the question and I hadn't dated anyone seriously since the divorce. But at least I'd been included. At least I'd still existed in their perfect family narrative. Now I'd been erased completely. Not even a deletion note, no explanation, no courtesy call. Just gone as if I'd never been Emily's sister at all. I sat there in my quiet apartment, the only sound the hum of my refrigerator and the distant traffic from the street below, and felt something crack open in my chest. It wasn't surprise exactly, more like the confirmation of something I'd always suspected, that I was expendable, that I'd always been the odd one out the piece that didn't quite fit the puzzle they were so desperate to complete. My hands were shaking as I picked up my phone. I should have left it alone. I should have poured that wine and watched something mindless on Netflix and pretended this didn't matter. But 35 years of being the forgotten daughter, the difficult one, the one who asked too many questions and never learned to just smile and nod, that all came bubbling up. I dialed Mom's number. 3 rings. I counted them, my heart hammering harder with each one. "I was wondering when you'd call." Mom's voice was controlled, measured the tone she used when she was already prepared for confrontation, like she'd been rehearsing her lines. I forced myself to keep my voice steady, professional, the same voice I used when presenting quarterly reports to executives who were looking for any sign of weakness. "Why isn't my name on the guest list?" The pause that followed felt like an eternity. I could hear her breathing on the other end, could practically see her in the kitchen of my childhood home. One hand on the granite countertop Dad had installed 5 years ago, her lips pressed into that thin line that meant she'd already made up her mind, and nothing I said would change it. "We decided it's better this way." Her words were clipped final. "The day will be perfect without drama." My grip tightened on the phone until my knuckles went white. "What drama? I haven't done anything. I haven't even seen you all in 2 months. Her voice dropped into that ice-cold register I'd heard my entire life, the one that could freeze blood. "You know what you did. Stop playing victim, Rachel. It's not a good look on you." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone screen, watching it fade to black, and something inside me shifted. Memories came flooding back, uninvited but brutally clear. I was 8 years old, standing in the hallway while Mom yelled at me for breaking her favorite vase, even though I'd watched Emily knock it over while dancing. I was 12, sitting in the car while my whole family drove home early from my academic awards ceremony because Emily was upset that she didn't win anything. I was 18, listening to Mom tell me that a full scholarship was at least proof you're good for something, while Emily got a new car for barely graduating high school. I was 22, being pulled aside at Thanksgiving and told in harsh whispers not to mention that Emily had been caught cheating on her finals because family protects family. I was 28, filing for divorce, and Mom's only comment was, "I'm not surprised. You always were difficult to love." 35 years of being second best, of being the problem, of watching my sister become the golden child, while I became the scapegoat for everything that went wrong. I looked around my apartment at the life I'd built, despite them, not because of them. The framed degrees on my wall that I'd earned through late nights and determination. The furniture I'd chosen carefully, piece by piece. The bookshelf full of novels and financial journals. The kitchen where I'd learned to cook for one without feeling like it was a failure. This was mine. All mine. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. If they wanted to erase me from their perfect day, fine. But I was a senior financial analyst. I spent my days finding patterns in numbers that other people missed. I uncovered discrepancies. I followed paper trails that people thought they'd hidden. And I was very, very good at my job. Let them have their perfect day, I thought, my fingers already moving across the keyboard. I'd let the truth attend in my place. The glow of my laptop screen reflected in the darkened window as I sat there trying to decide where to start. But before I could type anything into the search bar, a memory surfaced sharp and clear, as if it had happened yesterday instead of 6 years ago. I was 29 already, 3 years into my career at the firm, when Emily called to tell me she'd graduated from State University. I remembered feeling genuinely happy for her despite everything. She'd struggled through college, changing majors, twice taking extra years. I drove to Mom and Dad's house that weekend with a card and a gift certificate to her favorite restaurant. Emily's old bedroom had been converted into a sort of shrine to her achievements, such as they were. Dance recital photos, cheerleading trophies, participation ribbons from events she'd barely shown up for. And there, prominently displayed on her desk in an expensive frame, was her diploma. I picked it up to admire it, sister to sister, genuinely wanting to share in her accomplishment. That's when I noticed the seal looked wrong. Too sharp, too perfect, like it had been printed rather than embossed. I held it up to the light. Standard printer paper, not the heavy certificate stock universities use. And when I looked closer at the registrar's signature, my stomach dropped. It was in Arial font. 12-point Arial printed directly onto the page. Emily had left the room to answer her phone, and I stood there holding a fake diploma, my hands starting to shake. This wasn't just a mistake or a placeholder. This was fraud. My sister was going to use this to apply for jobs, to build a career, to lie her way into opportunities that other people had earned honestly. I found Mom in the kitchen, pulled her aside, kept my voice low and calm. I explained what I'd seen, showed her the flaws, told her quietly, privately, that Emily needed to stop this before it went any further, before she got caught and it ruined everything. Mom's face had gone from confusion to understanding to pure fury in the span of about 5 seconds. "You can't let your sister have one thing." Her voice was a harsh whisper, but the venom in it was unmistakable. "You got your degree. You got your fancy job. Why can't she have hers?" I tried to explain that this wasn't about jealousy. This was about the law, about fraud, about Emily potentially facing criminal charges. Mom cut me off with a sharp gesture. "She's already applied for jobs. She needs this. Are you really going to ruin your sister's life because you're jealous that she's finally getting somewhere?" 2 weeks later, Emily had a new diploma. Better quality this time, properly aged paper, an embossed seal that looked legitimate. Mom had paid someone to make it. Emily got hired at a marketing firm downtown, a position that required a bachelor's degree. She's still there today, 6 years later, built an entire career on a lie that I'd tried to stop and Mom had perfected. That memory sat heavy in my chest as I reached for my phone again. I needed to talk to Dad. He was the only one who'd ever seemed to see me, really see me, even if he'd never had the strength to stand up for me. He answered on the fifth ring, his voice rough and tired. "Hey, sweetheart." Those 2 words said with such simple affection almost broke me. I swallowed hard against the tightness in my throat. "Dad, did you know I'm not invited to the wedding?" The silence that followed was heavy with things unsaid. I could hear his breathing on the other end, labored and slow. Finally, "Your mother thinks it's best." Not "I think" or "we decided." Your mother. Like he'd been outvoted in his own family. Like he'd stopped having opinions years ago. "Dad, are you okay? You sound tired." Even over the phone, something felt wrong. His breathing was too deliberate, like each breath took effort. He cleared his throat and I heard the rasp in it. "Just old, honey. Just old." But I knew old. I worked with people in their 60s and 70s who had more energy than some of my younger colleagues. This wasn't old. This was something else. Something he wasn't telling me. "Dad." He interrupted, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I can't fight her anymore. I'm too tired to fight." The resignation in those words terrified me more than anything Mom had ever said to me. Dad had always been quiet, always been the peacekeeper, but I'd never heard him sound so defeated, so done. We said goodbye shortly after, and I sat there staring at my phone, a terrible suspicion forming in my mind. I pushed it away. I couldn't think about that right now. Instead, I did what I do best. I analyzed data. I spent the next 2 hours pulling up every family photo I could find. Facebook, Instagram, my own carefully curated albums, even old Flickr accounts from the early 2000s. I created a spreadsheet because that's how my brain works, how I make sense of chaos. I logged every photo, noted who was in it, who was centered, who was cropped or pushed to the edges. The numbers told a story my heart had always known, but my head had tried to rationalize away. 127 family photos spanning 2 decades. Mom stood next to Emily in 94% of them, always touching her, always angled toward her like Emily was the sun, and Mom was orbiting around her. Dad appeared in only 62%, and in those photos he was always in the background, slightly out of focus, like an afterthought. I appeared in 48%, and when I did appear, I was at the edge of the frame in 73% of those shots. In several, I was literally half cropped out, my face partially cut off by the border. Every birthday, every holiday, every graduation, every milestone, Emily was dead center. I was peripheral or absent. Dad was a ghost. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't just the way photos happened to turn out. This was design. This was intention. This was a family that had been carefully constructed around one golden child while the rest of us faded into the background. I closed the spreadsheet and opened a new browser window. My fingers moved almost automatically, typing into the search bar, Andrew Chen, CEO, investment firm. If they were going to exclude me from this wedding, I was going to know exactly what I was being excluded from. And more importantly, I was going to know why. Because there's always a why. In my work, I've learned that numbers don't lie. People do. And someone in my family was lying about something big enough to make them erase me completely. The search results started loading, and I leaned forward, my analyst brain already cataloging patterns, looking for discrepancies, searching for the truth they didn't want me to find. They'd built their perfect family on lies. It was time to see what else they'd buried. Andrew Chen's digital footprint was extensive, which made sense for a CEO. His LinkedIn profile showed a carefully curated career trajectory: Columbia Business School, early success at a hedge fund, then founding his own investment firm at 30. His Facebook was more personal but still polished, the kind of social media presence someone maintains when they know clients might be watching. Instagram was a mix of both professional shots interspersed with carefully staged casual moments. I scrolled through years of posts, my eyes growing tired from the blue light, but my mind refusing to stop. Corporate events, ribbon cuttings, golf tournaments with other men in expensive polo shirts. And then, buried in a post from 3 years ago, I found it. A charity gala photo. Andrew, in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, champagne flute raised toward the camera that practiced smile of someone who'd attended 1,000 of these events. But it wasn't Andrew that made my breath catch. It was the woman standing next to him, her arm linked through his in that familiar, possessive way she had. Mom. She was wearing the navy dress she'd bought for some fundraiser, the one she'd shown me photos of because it had cost more than my monthly car payment. Her hair was styled the way she always wore it for formal events, and she was beaming at the camera like she'd won some kind of prize. The caption posted from Andrew's account read, "Great reconnecting with old friends, looking forward to future collaborations." Old friends. My hands were shaking as I checked the date. June 3 years ago. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Mom had never mentioned knowing Andrew, not once. When Emily had first started dating him 2 years ago, Mom had acted like she was meeting him for the first time, asking him polite questions about his business, his family, his intentions toward her daughter. I pulled up Emily's Instagram with fingers that felt numb. I scrolled back through 2 years of posts, past engagement photos and couple selfies and restaurant check-ins, until I found the first one, the origin story of their relationship. The photo showed Emily and Andrew sitting at a Starbucks holding hands across a small table, both grinning like teenagers. The caption made my stomach turn, "When you meet your soulmate at Starbucks." #meant to be #love at first sight. The date was March 15th, 2 years ago, 10 months after Mom had her arm linked through Andrew's at that charity gala. 10 months after they'd posed together as old friends, looking forward to future collaborations. I took screenshots of everything, my professional training kicking in automatically. Document, verify, cross-reference. I opened a new Excel spreadsheet and started building a timeline because that's what I do when the world stops making sense. I make it make sense. I needed confirmation, needed to know if I was seeing patterns that didn't exist, or if this was as calculated as it looked. I picked up my phone and called Jennifer, my cousin on Mom's side, the only family member who'd ever been willing to tell me uncomfortable truths. She answered on the second ring. "Rachel, hey, it's been forever." I skipped the pleasantries. "Jen, how did Emily meet Andrew?" There was a pause, and I could practically hear her confusion through the phone. "What do you mean your mom introduced them? She told us all about it at Christmas that year, said she'd found the perfect guy for Emily. Why are you asking?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "Just curious. Thanks, Jen." I hung up before she could ask more questions. So it was true. Mom had set them up. This whole coffee shop meet-cute story was fabricated, a romantic narrative to cover up what was actually an arranged marriage. But why? Why would Mom need to arrange Emily's marriage to a CEO she somehow already knew? And why construct such an elaborate lie about it? I typed into Google, "reasons for arranged marriage." The results ranged from cultural tradition to practical necessity. Financial stability, business mergers, debt consolidation, social climbing, immigration status. Which box did this check? I went back to Andrew's name and added another search term, Andrew Chen Investment Firm Lawsuit. The first result was from a business journal I recognized, dated 4 years ago. The headline made my pulse quicken. Chen Investment Group settles client fraud, lawsuit for undisclosed amount. I clicked through and read every word. 3 clients had come forward claiming Andrew mishandled their funds, made unauthorized trades, charged excessive and unexplained fees. The language was careful legal, designed to avoid defamation. But reading between the lines, the implications were clear. The case had settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. No admission of wrongdoing from Andrew or his firm. His company had survived, but I could imagine the reputational damage. I scrolled down to the comments section where anonymous posters had been less careful with their accusations. Money laundering front, one asked. How did this guy avoid jail time? Another wondered. That settlement was probably 7 figures. Guilty people pay to make problems disappear. I sat back and stared at my screen at the photo of Mom and Andrew from 3 years ago, at Emily's fabricated love story at the lawsuit that had threatened to destroy Andrew's reputation right before he mysteriously became Mom's old friend. My mother didn't just approve the groom, she'd recruited him. The question that kept circling in my mind, the one that made my stomach churn with dread, was simple: recruited him for what? I stared at that question on my screen until my eyes burned. What was Andrew being recruited for? What did Mom need from him badly enough to construct an elaborate romance, to lie about how they met, to push this wedding through, despite whatever red flags might exist? But I couldn't answer that question yet. What I could do was warn Emily. Whatever arrangement existed between Mom and Andrew, Emily deserved to know the truth about the man she was about to marry. I opened a new email and started typing, then deleted it. Started again, deleted again. For 3 hours, I crafted and recrafted that message, trying to find the balance between honest concern and accusation, between sisterly love and the bitter reality that we'd never really been sisters at all. The subject line alone took me 20 minutes. Something you should know from someone who cares. The body of the email was careful, measured, stripped of any emotion that could be twisted into jealousy or malice. I know we're not close, but I'm still your sister. I found some information about Andrew's business history that concerns me. There was a lawsuit 4 years ago involving client funds. I attached the article. I just think you should know before you legally tie yourself to him. Please just read it. Love, your sister. I attached the link to the Business Journal article and then sat there, cursor hovering over the send button, for another 10 minutes. This would either help her or destroy whatever threadbare connection we still had. But I couldn't not send it. I couldn't let her walk into something blindly, even if she hated me for it. I clicked send. The read receipt came back 20 minutes later. Emily had opened it. I watched my inbox obsessively for the rest of the night, refreshing every few minutes, waiting for a response. A thank you. A question. Even an angry dismissal would have been something. Nothing came. 3 days of silence followed. I went to work, sat through meetings, analyzed spreadsheets, and checked my phone compulsively. Still nothing. I'd started to convince myself that maybe Emily was processing the information, maybe doing her own research, maybe reconsidering things. Then Mom called. Family dinner, tonight, 7 p.m. Don't be late. Her voice had that quality I remembered from childhood, the one that meant consequences would follow disobedience. She hung up before I could respond. Every instinct I had screamed at me not to go, but some pathetic, hopeful part of me wondered if maybe this was it. Maybe they'd read the article and wanted to talk, to actually discuss this like adults. I pulled up to the house at 6:55, that same sprawling suburban home where I'd grown up feeling like a guest. Emily's silver sedan was already in the driveway. Dad's truck was parked in its usual spot. I walked through the front door and the silence hit me immediately. No sounds of dinner preparation, no warm kitchen smells, just an eerie quiet that made the hair on my arms stand up. They were all in the dining room, sitting, waiting. No plates on the table, no food. Just 3 people positioned like a tribunal, and I was the accused. Mom's face was carved from stone. Emily sat beside her, eyes red and puffy, though whether from crying or rage I couldn't tell. Dad was at the head of the table, staring at his folded hands, refusing to look at me. I remained standing in the doorway. Mom spoke first, her voice sharp as a blade. We need to discuss your harassment of your sister. My stomach dropped. Harassment? I sent 1 email. Emily's voice cracked as she held up her phone like evidence at a trial. You've been stalking Andrew online, going through years of his posts, digging into his past like some kind of obsessed psycho. This is insane. I forced myself to stay calm to keep my voice level. I found a public article about a lawsuit. I thought you should know before you legally bind yourself to someone. Mom's hand slammed down on the mahogany table hard enough to make the salt shaker jump. Andrew explained that lawsuit to us 2 years ago. It was a frivolous claim by a disgruntled client who lost money through his own poor decisions. Andrew won. That article is deliberately misleading. It says settled, not won. Are you calling your sister's fiancé a liar? Mom's voice rose to a level that used to send me running to my room as a child. Are you calling me a liar? I looked at Dad, desperate for any sign of support, any indication that someone in this room saw how insane this was. He finally lifted his eyes to meet mine, and what I saw there was worse than Mom's fury. Resignation, defeat. Let it go, sweetheart, he whispered. Those 4 words delivered in that broken voice hurt more than anything Mom had ever said to me. Mom stood smoothing down her dress with deliberate precision. You have 2 options. 1, you apologize to Emily and to Andrew. You come to the wedding. You smile, you're pleasant, and you behave yourself. 2, you don't come at all. Choose. Now. I looked at Emily, who was watching me through splayed fingers, and there it was. Just for a second before she hid it, the tiniest smirk playing at the corner of her mouth. She was enjoying this. Watching me be put in my place, watching me squirm. I grabbed my purse and stood. I choose option 3. I find out why you're all so desperate to make this wedding happen. I was halfway to the door when Mom's voice stopped me cold. If you try to ruin this wedding, you'll regret it. I turned back, met her eyes. Is that a threat? She smiled, and the coldness in it made my blood freeze. It's a promise. I walked out into the cool evening air, got in my car, and sat there shaking for a full 5 minutes before I could trust myself to drive. I thought I was walking away, but as I started the engine and pulled out of that driveway for what I somehow knew would be the last time I realized the truth, I wasn't walking away. I was stepping back to watch it burn. I spent the next week throwing myself into work, burying myself in spreadsheets and quarterly reports, anything to avoid thinking about that dinner. But every night I came home to my quiet condo and felt the walls closing in. This place had been my refuge, my proof that I could build something solid on my own. But now it felt tainted, somehow contaminated by the reality that my family's dysfunction was following me even here. On Thursday evening, I found myself scrolling through mortgage refinance rates. I'd been meaning to do this for months. Interest rates had dropped and I could save a couple $100s a month if I refinanced. It seemed like the perfect time for a fresh start, a clean break from everything family-related. I'd focus on my future, on building financial security, on moving forward without them. I filled out the online application that night, entering information I knew by heart. Excellent payment history. Stable employment for 8 years. Healthy savings account. This should be straightforward routine, the kind of application that gets approved automatically. The loan officer called 48 hours later on Saturday morning. I was drinking coffee in my kitchen when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Morrison, this is David Chen from First National. We need to discuss some issues with your refinance application. His tone was careful, apologetic, in that way people get when they're about to deliver bad news. My stomach tightened. Issues? What kind of issues? There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. Your credit score is 487. That's significantly below our lending threshold of 620. I'm afraid we can't approve your application. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. That's impossible. I've never missed a payment in my life. I check my credit card statement every single month. It's always paid in full. Ma'am, I'm showing $63,000 in outstanding credit card debt across 5 different cards. 4 of them are severely delinquent, over 180 days past due. According to this report, collection agencies have been attempting to reach you. My hands started shaking so badly I had to set down my mug. I only have 1 credit card. 1. And it has a 0 balance. There must be some mistake. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "Would you like me to send you the full credit report? You have a right to see everything we're seeing." I was in my car 15 minutes later driving to the bank branch demanding a printed copy of the full report. The manager took one look at my face and didn't argue. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my car in the parking lot, hands trembling as I tore open the manila envelope. The report was 30 pages long. I flipped past the summary to the detailed account history, and my vision started to blur. 5 credit cards. 5. The first one had been opened when I was 16 years old. 19 years ago. Current balance $12,400. The second opened when I was 17. Balance $15,200. The third at 18. $18,900. The fourth at 19. $11,300. The fifth at 21. $5,200. All of them listed my childhood address. All of them bore my social security number. The purchase history read like a chronicle of someone else's life. Grocery stores, gas stations, department stores, cash advances from ATMs. Regular minimum payments had been made for years, keeping the accounts active and in good standing. Then 3 years ago, the payments stopped. Just stopped. And the debt had been growing ever since, interest compounding, late fees piling up like snow in a storm that never ended. I sat there in my car in a bank parking lot on a Saturday morning and felt my entire understanding of my life crack open. My professional training kicked in through the shock, that analytical part of my brain that knew how to examine evidence even when my heart was breaking. The report included copies of the original card applications. I pulled them out with shaking hands and studied the signatures. They looked like mine at first glance, the same general shape, the same letters. But I sign hundreds of documents at work. I know my own signature the way I know my own face. These were close but wrong. The loops were too round. The slant was slightly off. The pressure of the pen was different. They were forgeries. Good ones, skilled ones, but forgeries nonetheless. And they'd been made when I was a minor. 16, 17, 18 years old. I would have still been living at home, still under my parents' roof. Mom had legal access to everything: my social security card, my birth certificate, every document that proved I existed. She'd opened these cards, used them for years, made minimum payments to keep them active, to keep building my credit history into something that looked legitimate. Then 3 years ago, she'd simply stopped paying and let them die. My credit had been destroyed for 3 years, and I'd never known because I already owned my condo. I already had my one credit card that I used responsibly. I'd never had reason to pull my full credit report. Until now. Until I tried to move forward with my life and discovered that my mother had stolen my future before I even knew I had one. I stared at those forged signatures, at 19 years of systematic fraud, and finally understood. I wasn't uninvited because I was difficult. I was uninvited because I was collateral. I didn't go home. I sat in that parking lot with 30 pages of evidence in my lap and called my mother. My hands were still shaking, but my voice came out steady, cold, controlled. "We need to meet. Just you and me. Now." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, calculating. "About what?" "About the $63,000 in credit card debt you opened in my name." The silence that followed stretched so long I thought she might hang up. Then, "Come to the house. Your father is at his doctor's appointment. Emily's at work." She didn't deny it, didn't act confused or outraged or surprised, just gave me a time and place like we were scheduling a business meeting. I drove there in a fog, the credit report sitting on my passenger seat like evidence at a crime scene. When I pulled into the driveway 30 minutes later, I noticed Dad's truck was indeed gone. Emily's car was nowhere to be seen. Just Mom's sedan parked in its usual spot. I walked in without knocking. The house still smelled the same, that mixture of her expensive candles and whatever cleaning products she insisted were the only ones worth buying. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a coffee cup in her hands, looking composed and put together in that way she always did, like she'd just stepped out of a salon. She didn't look surprised to see me. She didn't look guilty. She looked prepared, like she'd been expecting this conversation for years and had her answers ready. I slammed the credit report on the table hard enough to make her coffee cup rattle. Explain this. Mom took a slow sip of her coffee, didn't even glance at the papers in front of her. When she finally spoke, her voice was matter-of-fact, almost bored. You were supposed to never find out. Not an apology, not a denial. A statement of fact, like she was commenting on the weather. Something hot and dangerous rose in my chest. You committed identity theft against your own daughter. You destroyed my credit. For what? She finally met my eyes, and what I saw there was worse than guilt. It was justification. It was the absolute certainty that she'd done what she had to do. Your father got laid off when you were 16. We were drowning in bills. Emily needed private tutoring to even have a chance at graduating high school. We needed money. She said it like it was obvious, like any mother would have done the same. You were young. It wouldn't affect you for years. I was going to pay it all off before you ever needed credit. But you didn't. My voice was shaking now, despite my best efforts. You stopped paying 3 years ago. You just let the debt rot. Her jaw tightened, the first crack in her composure. I ran out of money. I waited, knowing there was more. She set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. But Andrew is helping me pay it down now. That's part of the arrangement. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Andrew knows about this, about the fraud. Of course. She said it like I was being naive for even asking. I told him everything before I introduced him to Emily. He's been making the minimum payments for the past 6 months, keeps the accounts from going into collections. My mind was racing, trying to fit this piece into the puzzle. In exchange for what? The smile that crossed her face made my blood run cold. In exchange for marrying into a respectable family. Andrew had that lawsuit scandal. His reputation was damaged. He needs rehabilitation, social legitimacy connections in the community. We give him that. She paused. He helps us with our financial situation. Everyone wins. Except me. Her smile faded. You would have won too if you'd just kept your mouth shut and smiled at the wedding. But you can't help yourself, can you? Always digging, always questioning, always so determined to be the honest one. She practically spat the last words. You're too honest, darling. It's your fatal flaw. So that was it. That was why I'd been erased from the guest list. Not because of some petty drama or old resentment. Because I was a liability. Because Andrew was paying off debt that was tied to my name, and if I showed up at the wedding and started asking questions if I discovered what they'd done, the whole arrangement would fall apart. Mom reached into a folder on the table and slid a document across to me. It was printed on legal letterhead, official-looking, with signatures and notary stamps at the bottom. This is a payment plan agreement. You acknowledge the debt as yours, which legally it is since it's your name and your social security number, and you agree to let Andrew handle the payments until it's cleared. In exchange, we don't press charges. I stared at her. Press charges for what? For stealing from the family. Her voice was smooth, practiced. That's what I'll tell everyone if you cause trouble. Who do you think they'll believe? The daughter who's always been difficult, jealous of her sister, bitter about her divorce. Or the mother who's been a pillar of this community for 40 years, who volunteers at the hospital, who everyone knows and respects. I looked down at the document. She had me cornered. If I refused to sign, she'd destroy whatever reputation I had left. If I reported the identity theft, it would be my word against hers, and she had decades of social capital to spend. My hand was shaking as I picked up the pen. But before I put it to paper, I pulled out my phone, set it on the table, opened the camera, and took clear, well-lit photos of every single page. Mom watched me do it, her expression unreadable. Then I signed. She took the document, folded it carefully, tucked it back into her folder. Smart girl, now stay away from the wedding. Stay away from Emily. Stay away from all of us. I stood up, picked up my phone, and walked out of that kitchen for what I knew would be the last time. They'd erased me from their wedding. They'd stolen my identity, destroyed my credit, and turned me into collateral for their arranged marriage scheme. But they'd forgotten one crucial detail. I'm an accountant who keeps receipts. The days between signing that document and the wedding passed in a strange blur. I went to work, came home, ate meals I didn't taste, and tried not to think about what was happening. I kept those photos on my phone, backed them up to 3 different cloud services, and told myself I'd figure out what to do with them later. For now, I just needed to survive. Saturday morning arrived whether I wanted it to or not. My alarm went off at 7, pulling me out of restless sleep filled with dreams I couldn't quite remember. I'd tossed and turned all night, checking the clock every hour, watching the minutes tick closer to 4 p.m. when my sister would marry a man as corrupt as our mother in a ceremony designed to launder money and legitimize fraud. I should have stayed in bed, should have pulled the covers over my head and ignored the world. But some masochistic part of me reached for my phone before I was fully awake. Instagram opened automatically and my feed exploded with wedding content. Emily's bridesmaids had apparently been up since dawn, posting photos of mimosas and matching robes with Bride Tribe embroidered on the back. The makeup artist had shared a time-lapse video of Emily's transformation, her face going from bare to camera-ready in 30 seconds of sped-up footage. The florist posted photos of the centerpiece's white roses and peonies arranged in crystal vases that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. And there was Mom sitting in a salon chair at some upscale place downtown, her hair being styled into elegant waves while Emily sat beside her in the chair next to hers. The caption read, "My beautiful baby girl's special day," followed by a string of heart emojis. 463 likes already, comments full of congratulations and heart-eyed faces. I scrolled through it all, my chest getting tighter with each post. Behind-the-scenes videos of the venue, a sprawling estate with manicured gardens and a terrace overlooking a lake. Photos of the cake, 4 tiers of pristine white fondant decorated with sugar flowers. Shots of the bridal suite where Emily would get dressed, champagne chilling in a silver bucket, her dress hanging in the frame like something out of a magazine. I wasn't tagged in any of it. My name didn't appear in any captions. In the group photos of family getting ready, I simply didn't exist. They'd erased me so completely that anyone scrolling through would think Emily only had parents, no sister at all. I turned off my phone and threw it onto the couch harder than necessary. Coffee. I needed coffee. I needed to do something normal, something routine, something that would remind me I had a life outside of this family's dysfunction. I went through the motions of grinding beans, measuring water, waiting for the machine to hiss and gurgle. While it brewed, I opened my laptop, thinking I'd lose myself in work for a few hours. Anything to avoid thinking about what was happening across town. I had emails piling up from the multi-company audit I'd been leading for the past 2 months. Routine stuff that should have been mindless enough to distract me. But one email caught my eye immediately. The subject line read, "Automated fraud alert, action required." My firm used a sophisticated financial monitoring system that flagged suspicious transaction patterns across the companies we audited. It was designed to catch things before they became criminal investigations to protect our clients and our liability. I saw these alerts maybe once or twice a year. They were rare, and they were always serious. I opened it, my coffee forgotten. Chen Investment Group, Andrew's company. The system had flagged a pattern of unusual cash transfers over the past 6 months. I pulled up the detailed report, my professional training kicking in automatically despite the personal connection making my hands shake. $50,000 transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands in January. $75,000 in February. $100,000 in March. The amounts varied but always stayed under $250,000, the federal reporting threshold that would trigger automatic scrutiny. I'd seen this before. We all had anyone who worked in financial analysis. It was called structuring, deliberately breaking up large transactions into smaller ones to avoid detection. It was textbook money laundering. My brain started connecting dots faster than I could process them. Andrew had been moving money for 6 months. The same 6 months he'd been making minimum payments on the credit card debt in my name, the payments Mom said were part of the arrangement. The wedding was today. In a few hours, Emily would become Andrew's legal spouse, which meant she'd have automatic access to his finances in ways that girlfriends and fiancés didn't. If Andrew got investigated, if the authorities came after him for money laundering, he could transfer assets to Emily. Spouses had certain legal protections, certain abilities to claim they didn't know about their husband's criminal activities. And if somehow Emily got implicated too well, she was working under a fake degree at a job she'd obtained through fraud. Nothing in her professional life was legitimate. She could claim she was manipulated, didn't understand what was happening, was just a victim of Andrew's schemes. The wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a shell game, a strategic move in whatever criminal enterprise Andrew was running. And Mom had orchestrated the whole thing, trading her daughter for debt relief and probably a cut of whatever money Andrew was moving. I sat there with my cold coffee and my laptop, staring at numbers that told a story everyone else was choosing to ignore. I could do nothing. Sign that payment agreement, let Andrew handle the debt, stay out of it like Mom had ordered. Watch my sister marry a criminal and pretend I didn't know what was happening. I could forward this alert to the authorities, anonymously let the system work, remove myself from the equation entirely. I could send the information to Andrew, give him a chance to call it off, to walk away before he legally tied himself to my family's mess. Or I could send it to Emily, warn her that she was being used as a pawn in a money laundering scheme, that this wedding was a business transaction and she was the merchandise being traded. I thought about 35 years of being the forgotten daughter, of watching Emily get praised for things I'd achieved and punished for things she'd done, of Mom stealing my identity, destroying my credit, turning me into collateral, of Dad's tired voice saying he was too exhausted to fight, of that payment agreement I'd been forced to sign, acknowledging debt I'd never created, protecting people who'd never protected me. I opened a new browser window and stared at the blinking cursor. The numbers didn't lie, even if everyone else did. I was reaching for my phone to take photos of the fraud alert on my screen when my doorbell rang. The sound made me jump, my coffee cup nearly tipping over. I wasn't expecting anyone. Everyone I knew was either at a wedding I'd been banned from or had no reason to visit me on a Saturday morning. For a paranoid second, I wondered if Mom had somehow known I was looking at Andrew's financial crimes and sent someone to stop me. I walked to the door and checked the peephole. The hallway was empty. I opened the door cautiously, one hand still on the doorknob, ready to slam it shut if needed. No one was there. But on my doormat sat a small padded envelope, the kind you'd use to mail something fragile. No postage, no return address. Just my name written across the front in handwriting that looked shaky, uncertain, like it had been written by someone with trembling hands. Rachel Morrison, urgent. My heart was pounding as I picked it up and brought it inside, locking the door behind me. I sat on my couch and opened it carefully, half expecting something dangerous to fall out. Inside was a USB drive, black and unmarked, and a handwritten note on plain white paper, the same shaky handwriting as the envelope. You're not the only one who sees the lies. Watch everything before the vows. Someone who should have spoken up years ago. I stared at that note for a full minute, trying to process what it meant. Someone else knew. Someone else had been watching my family's dysfunction and had evidence I didn't. Someone who wanted me to know the truth but was too afraid to reveal themselves. My hands were shaking as I carried my laptop to the couch and plugged in the USB drive. It took a few seconds to load, and then a folder appeared with 4 video files inside. The file names alone made my stomach drop. Emily Nathan, gala parking, 3 months, move. Emily Nathan, hotel bar, 2 months, move. Andrew, unknown woman, restaurant booth, 6 months, move. Mom Nathan, coffee shop, 1 year, move. Nathan. That name appeared in 3 of the 4 files. I didn't know anyone named Nathan, but clearly this person was connected to Emily, to Andrew, to Mom. Connected to all of them in ways that had been filmed and documented by whoever sent me this drive. I clicked on File 1, my cursor hovering over the play button for just a second before I committed. The video quality was shaky, clearly filmed on a phone from a distance, but the image was clear enough. A parking garage lit by harsh fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out and clinical. The timestamp in the corner read 11:47 p.m. 3 months ago. I recognized the location immediately. The Grand Hotel downtown, the same place where Emily's company had held their annual gala. Emily had told me about that event. Actually, she hadn't told me directly. I'd seen the photos on Instagram. She'd worn a burgundy dress and posted a selfie with the caption about representing her company. She'd said Andrew was traveling for business and couldn't attend. In the video, a side door opened and Emily emerged still in that burgundy dress, her hair slightly disheveled, now her heels clicking on the concrete. She looked around nervously, checking over her shoulder like she was afraid of being followed. A man appeared from the shadows near a concrete pillar. Tall, broad-shouldered dark hair, wearing an expensive-looking suit. I couldn't see his face clearly from this angle, but I could see what happened next with perfect clarity. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. He just walked up to her and pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, melting against him like she'd been waiting for this all night. The kiss was deep, intense, practiced. This wasn't a first kiss or a spontaneous moment. This was familiar territory. When they broke apart, his hand settled on her lower back in a way that was possessive, comfortable, intimate. They walked together toward a black Mercedes, and I watched them get in. The video ended. I sat there staring at my laptop screen, my sister frozen in that final frame, looking back over her shoulder one more time before she got into a car with a man who wasn't her fiancé. I clicked on File 2 before I could talk myself out of it. More of Emily and Nathan, that's who this must be, at a hotel bar 2 months ago. They sat close together in a dim corner booth, their conversation looking intense and private. At one point, his hand covered hers on the table and she didn't pull away. The video was shorter, just 2 minutes of them talking, but the intimacy was obvious. File 3 made me realize this wasn't just Emily's betrayal. Andrew sat in an upscale restaurant booth with a blonde woman in her 40s, someone polished and professional-looking. They shared a bottle of wine, laughed at private jokes. He reached across the table and tucked her hair behind her ear with a tenderness that spoke of familiarity. So Andrew was cheating too. They were both playing each other, both keeping secrets, both living double lives. But it was File 4 that made my blood run cold. The video opened on a coffee shop. I recognized a place near the old neighborhood where I grew up. The date stamp said 1 year ago, before Emily had even met Andrew, according to the official story. Before any of this had started. Mom sat at a small table near the window, and across from her was the same man from Emily's videos, Nathan. I could see his face clearly now in the daylight. Sharp features, cold eyes, an expression that was all business. Mom slid an envelope across the table. Nathan picked it up without hesitation, opened it, and I watched him count what was clearly cash, bills that he flipped through with practiced efficiency. He nodded, said something I couldn't hear, and tucked the envelope into his jacket. They talked for several more minutes. Mom's body language was tense, defensive. At one point, she looked like she might cry. Her hand pressed to her mouth, her shoulders hunched. Nathan's expression never changed. Cold, hard, unmoved by whatever she was saying. This wasn't a friendly meeting. This wasn't a business transaction. This was something darker. Payment coercion control. I paused the video and stared at Nathan's face, trying to understand who he was and what he had on my mother. That made her hand over cash in a coffee shop a full year before she'd orchestrated Emily's marriage to Andrew. I picked up the handwritten note again, studying the shaky letters, the uncertain strokes of the pen. Something about it nagged at me, something familiar I couldn't quite place. The handwriting looked like mine, but older, shakier, like it came from someone who'd been silent too long. I set the note aside and went back to the videos, rewinding File 1 to get the clearest shot of Nathan's face. I took several screenshots from different angles, trying to capture him in the best light with the most detail visible. This was something I did at work occasionally, verifying identities of clients or tracking down information on people involved in financial transactions. I uploaded the clearest image to a reverse image search engine, the same tool I used for due diligence on high-value accounts. The search ran for 30 seconds, pulling from billions of indexed photos across the internet. Nothing. 0 results. I tried LinkedIn's photo search feature, thinking maybe he had a professional profile under a different name or with limited privacy settings. Again, nothing. In 2024, almost everyone had some kind of digital footprint, even people who tried to stay private. But Nathan was a ghost. That itself was suspicious. People who scrub their online presence that thoroughly are usually hiding something. I went back to File 4, the video of Mom and Nathan at the coffee shop, and scrubbed through it frame by frame. There had to be something, some detail I'd missed. I zoomed in on the table between them on the envelope Mom had slid across on Nathan's hands as he counted the money. Then I saw it. Under Nathan's coffee cup, barely visible, was the edge of what looked like a business card. I enhanced the image as much as my software would allow, squinting at the pixelated text. Nathan Pierce, Private Consulting. Below that, in smaller text, Consulting Services for Sensitive Family Matters. And a phone number. I typed Nathan Pierce Private Consulting into Google. One result came up, a bare-bones website that looked like it had been built in about 10 minutes. No photo, no testimonials. Just that same tagline about sensitive family matters, the phone number, and a generic contact form. No address. No LinkedIn profile linked. No reviews or social media presence. Whatever Nathan did for a living, he didn't want to be found easily. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Jake Reeves. Jake was a private investigator my firm kept on retainer for background checks on high-value clients, the kind of people whose financial histories needed to be thoroughly vetted before we took them on. I'd worked with him dozens of times over the years. He was good, discreet, and didn't ask unnecessary questions. He answered on the third ring. Rachel. It's Saturday. Please tell me this isn't about work. It's personal. I need a background check. Rush. I'll pay you personally whatever your rate is. There was a pause. Jake knew me well enough to know I didn't ask for favors lightly. Send me what you have. I texted him the screenshots of Nathan's face and the information from the business card. His name is Nathan Pierce. That's all I know. Give me a couple hours. I spent those 2 hours trying to work, trying to distract myself, but mostly just pacing my apartment and watching the clock tick closer to the wedding. At 11:30, Jake called back. Your guy's interesting, he said without preamble. Nathan Pierce, age 38, no criminal record, no property ownership, no employment history before 5 years ago. Before that, it's like he didn't exist. How is that possible? Name change. He used to go by Nathan Miller. Changed it legally 8 years ago. And before that, the records get thin, but I have a source at social services who owes me a favor. He paused. Nathan Miller was in the foster system from age 3 until he aged out at 18, bounced between 6 different homes in Harrison County. My heart stopped. What county? Harrison County. Why? That was the county where my mother grew up, the small town she'd left at 20 and never once mentioned again. In 35 years, I'd never heard her talk about her childhood, never seen photos from before she met Dad, never heard stories about high school friends or family. It was like her life had started the day she moved away. Jake, I need to know if he was ever placed in the same foster home as someone else. A girl named Linda Cartwright. That was my mother's maiden name. Jesus, Rachel, what are you into? Can you find out? Give me 24 hours, maybe less if my source comes through. I hung up and did the math in my head, trying to make the timeline work. Mom was 63 now. Nathan was 38. When Nathan was born, Mom would have been 25, already married to Dad, already had me. That didn't fit. But if Nathan had been in foster care from age 3, that meant he was born when Mom was 22. Still didn't work. I would have been a baby. I would have known if Mom had another child. Unless it happened before me. Before she met Dad. When she was still Linda Cartwright living in Harrison County. When she would have been 15. My phone buzzed in my hand, making me jump. A text from Dad. Are you home? I need to see you. Don't tell your mother. I stared at those words. Dad never texted, could barely work his phone most days. And he'd never in my entire life asked me to keep something from Mom. I typed back with shaking hands. Yes, come now. His response came immediately, 20 minutes. I looked at the clock. It was almost noon. The wedding started at 4. Why wasn't Dad getting ready? Why wasn't he with Mom and Emily playing his role in their perfect family tableau? I paced my apartment for those 20 minutes, checking the window every 30 seconds, my mind racing through possibilities. When the doorbell finally rang, I nearly ran to the door. Dad stood in my hallway, looking worse than I'd ever seen him. He'd lost weight, his clothes hanging loose on a frame that seemed to have shrunk. His face was gaunt. His skin had a grayish pallor, and he was leaning heavily against my doorframe like he needed it to stay upright. But his eyes were clear, sharp, determined in a way I hadn't seen in years. In his hand he held a USB drive. Black, unmarked, identical to the one that had been left on my doorstep this morning. "I need to tell you everything," he said, his voice rough but steady, "before it's too late." When he said too late, I thought he meant the wedding. I didn't know he meant his life. I pulled Dad inside and helped him to the couch. He practically collapsed onto it. His breathing labored like he'd just climbed several flights of stairs instead of walking down a hallway. I moved to get him water, but he waved me off with a hand that trembled. "I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer," he said without preamble. "Diagnosed 4 months ago." The room tilted. I sat down hard on the coffee table across from him. 4 months, Dad. Why didn't you? Your mother forbade it." His voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "She said telling you would ruin Emily's wedding plans, that we needed to keep everything perfect and happy until after the ceremony. She said I could tell you after, when it wouldn't matter anymore." When it wouldn't matter. When he'd be too sick for me to do anything about it. When the wedding would be over and the damage done. "How long do you have?" 3 months, maybe less. He met my eyes, and I saw acceptance there, a peace that terrified me more than panic would have. "I've made my peace with dying, Rachel. But I can't die knowing I stayed silent while your mother destroyed you." Tears were already burning in my eyes. "Dad?" He held up his hand to stop me. "I've been silent for 35 years. Every time she hurt you, every time she chose Emily over you, every time she made you feel like you didn't matter. I stayed quiet because I thought keeping the peace was the same as keeping the family together. I was wrong, and I'm done." He pulled a small spiral notebook from his jacket pocket, the kind you could buy at any drugstore. The pages were filled with his cramped handwriting, dates and times and observations that covered every available space. "I started noticing things about a year ago. Your mother taking phone calls in the garage with the door closed, money disappearing from our joint account, 500 here, 1,000 there. She was anxious all the time, jumping every time her phone rang, asking me constantly if you'd called, if you'd mentioned anything about Emily or the wedding." He flipped through the pages. "I installed a tracking app on her phone. I know it was an invasion of privacy, but I had to know what she was doing." My father, the quietest man I'd ever known, had been conducting surveillance on his own wife. I followed the tracking data. She was meeting someone. Always the same coffee shop, same time every 2 weeks, like clockwork. So I went there one day and sat in my truck across the street. That's when I saw Nathan. He paused. I started recording them. Just video from my phone, nothing sophisticated. But I documented every meeting, every envelope she passed him, every time she came home looking like she'd been crying. He'd been watching this unfold for a year. A year of knowing something was wrong and collecting evidence while cancer grew inside him. "Who is Nathan?" I asked, though I was already starting to piece it together from what Jake had told me. Dad took a shaky breath. "Nathan and your mother grew up in the same foster home. From the time she was 11 until she aged out at 18. They weren't blood relatives, but they were close. Too close." He looked down at his hands. "I found the file in a box your mother kept hidden in the attic. Medical records, social services reports. When your mother was 16, she got pregnant." The air left my lungs. "She had a baby, a boy. The state took him and put him up for adoption. It was Nathan's child. They were both just teenagers, both traumatized, both trapped in a broken system. The baby was gone before your mother even left the hospital." His voice cracked. She never spoke of it again. She married me had you and Emily built this perfect suburban life. She thought it was buried in the past where it couldn't hurt her. But Nathan found her. Dad nodded. 10 years ago. He tracked her down, showed up at the house one day when I was at work. Told her he'd spent his whole life wondering about the child they gave up searching for answers. Said she owed him money for the life they could have had for the family that was taken from them. So he's been blackmailing her. For 10 years. She's been paying him out of our savings, out of secret credit cards, out of any source she could find. That's where your identity theft started, Rachel. She ran out of her own credit and started using yours. He closed his eyes. 6 months ago, Nathan demanded more than she had. $50,000. Your mother was desperate. That's when she contacted Andrew. The pieces were falling into place now, ugly and clear. Andrew needed reputation rehabilitation after that lawsuit. Your mother offered him something better than money, social legitimacy, connections in the community, a beautiful wife from a respectable family. In exchange, Andrew pays Nathan through fake consulting fees, money laundering dressed up as business expenses. And Emily, Dad's expression darkened. I don't think Emily knows the real arrangement. But Nathan, he's manipulating her too. I think he seduced her deliberately, maybe to have leverage over Andrew, maybe to hurt your mother by corrupting her golden child. If Andrew tries to back out of the deal, Nathan can threaten to expose the affair. If your mother tries to stop paying, Nathan can destroy Emily's marriage before it even begins. The apartment was silent except for Dad's labored breathing. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. He reached out and took my hand. His skin was cold, papery thin. Because you're the only one in this family honest enough to stop it. You're the only one who won't be complicit in the lies. And because I won't be here to protect you from what happens when you do. I looked down at the USB drive sitting on my coffee table next to the one that had been delivered this morning. 2 identical drives. 2 copies of the same evidence. My father hadn't just handed me evidence. He'd handed me a bomb, and the only question left was when to detonate it. Dad left 20 minutes later, insisting he needed to get back to the venue before Mom noticed his absence. I watched him walk slowly to his truck, each step looking like it cost him something, and wondered if I'd ever see him again. He'd given me everything he had left the truth, the evidence and the choice of what to do with it. I closed the door and turned back to my apartment, which had transformed into some kind of evidence room. Credit reports spread across my coffee table. The fraud alert about Andrew's company still open on my laptop. 2 identical USB drives. Dad's notebook full of surveillance notes. The anonymous note that had come with the first drive written in handwriting I now recognized as his shaky from illness and fear. I had proof of everything. Identity theft stretching back 19 years, money laundering through Andrew's investment firm, blackmail payments from Mom to Nathan for a decade, Emily's affair with the same man who was blackmailing our mother, Andrew's own affair with someone else. A wedding that was nothing more than a business transaction designed to legitimize fraud and keep everyone's secrets buried. One email to the FBI would bring it all down. Every single person involved would face consequences. Mom would go to prison for identity theft and fraud. Andrew would be investigated for money laundering. Nathan would be charged with blackmail. Emily would lose everything her job built on a fake degree, her marriage before it even started, her reputation destroyed. My family would implode publicly, spectacularly, permanently. But Emily was still my sister. Despite 35 years of being second best, despite watching her get everything I earned and more, despite her role in this mess, she was still the little girl I'd grown up with. And maybe she really didn't know about Nathan's blackmail, about the real reason Mom had arranged this marriage. Maybe she was as much a victim as I was. Andrew was a criminal, but Nathan had him trapped in a web of extortion and manipulation. Walking away from that required courage Andrew might not have if he didn't know the full truth. And Mom, my mother who'd stolen my identity and destroyed my credit, she was also a 16-year-old girl who'd gotten pregnant in foster care and had her baby taken away. That trauma had twisted her into someone capable of terrible things, but it didn't make her a monster. Just broken. I pulled out my phone and opened a notes app, creating a list like I would for any complex problem at work. Option 1. Do nothing. Let the wedding happen. Stay silent like Dad had for 35 years. Everyone continues living their lies. My credit stays destroyed. Nathan keeps blackmailing Mom. The fraud continues. And I remain complicit through silence. Option 2. Send everything to authorities. FBI, SEC, IRS. Let the system handle it. Everyone faces legal consequences. Justice is served, but at the cost of destroying whatever family I had left. Option 3. Send the evidence to Andrew privately. Give him the information and let him decide. He could call off the wedding, walk away, protect himself. It puts the choice in his hands. I stared at those 3 options for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and created a new email account. Something anonymous and untraceable. truthteller2024@protonmail.com. The email took me 30 minutes to compose. I revised it half a dozen times, trying to strike the right tone. Informative but not cruel. Honest but not vindictive. Mr. Chen, you don't know me, but I know what you're involved in. I know about Nathan Pierce. I know about the money laundering through your firm. I know about the blackmail scheme he's running on your future mother-in-law. I know Emily is having an affair with Nathan. You're being used by all of them. By Nathan, by Emily's mother, possibly by Emily herself. The wedding today is not what you think it is. I'm attaching evidence. You deserve to know who you're marrying and what you're walking into. You have 3 hours before the ceremony. Choose wisely. A friend. I attached File 1 and File 2, the videos of Emily and Nathan together. The parking garage kiss. The intimate conversation at the hotel bar. I added a screenshot of the fraud alert about his company's suspicious transactions. My cursor hovered over the send button. This was it. Once I sent this, there was no taking it back. Andrew would know. He'd have to make a choice. Call off the wedding or go through with it anyway. I checked the time. 12:47 p.m. The wedding started at 4. That gave him just over 3 hours to process this information and decide what to do. I hit send. The email whooshed away into the digital void. I sat back and imagined how it would play out. Andrew would check his phone during a quiet moment, maybe while getting ready with his groomsmen. He'd see the subject line, open it with confusion. Watch the videos with growing shock and anger. He'd confront Emily privately, or maybe he'd just leave disappear before the ceremony started. Either way, he'd have the information he needed to protect himself. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that at that exact moment, Andrew was backstage at the venue, his laptop sitting open on the makeup counter while he was in the adjacent room with his groomsmen. His email was set to automatically download and display new messages, a convenience feature for staying on top of business correspondence. What I didn't know was that when my email arrived at 12:48 p.m., the laptop chimed loudly in the quiet bridal suite. What I didn't know was that Emily was sitting 3 feet away getting her makeup done when she glanced over casually and saw the subject line displayed in bold letters on the screen, "You're being used, watch before you say I do." What I didn't know was that Emily's stomach dropped, that she stood up calmly and told the makeup artist, "Just need 1 second." That she walked over to Andrew's laptop and clicked the email open with hands that had started to shake. What I didn't know was that she watched herself kissing Nathan in that parking garage, watched them together at the hotel bar, watched evidence of her own betrayal play out on a screen 3 hours before her wedding. What I didn't know was that she had maybe 90 seconds before Andrew would return from the other room, that she made a split-second decision born of panic and self-preservation, that she deleted the email and cleared the trash, thinking she'd erased the evidence. What I didn't know was that she'd been sloppy in her panic, that she'd forgotten Andrew's phone was synced to his laptop, that the email was still sitting unread in his pocket, a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. I thought I was giving Andrew a choice. I didn't know I was handing Emily a countdown to detonation. I spent the next 3 hours in a state of suspended anxiety, checking my phone every few minutes like the email might somehow bounce back, or Andrew might reply. He wouldn't reply, of course. It was an anonymous account. But some irrational part of me kept expecting something, some sign that my message had been received and acted upon. At 3:30, I made a decision I knew was masochistic but couldn't resist. I opened Instagram and searched for the wedding hashtag Emily had created, Bride and Groom Chen 2024. One of her bridesmaids was doing a live stream. I told myself I'd watch for just a minute, just to see if Andrew had called it off, if the ceremony was even happening. Just to know. The stream showed a venue more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. An estate with gardens that looked like something out of a fairy tale, white roses everywhere, string lights woven through trees that would glow like stars once the sun set. 200 guests in their finest clothes, murmuring and smiling, completely unaware of the rot underneath all this beauty. The music swelled. The guests stood. And Emily appeared at the end of the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than my car, looking every inch the perfect bride. Mom was already crying in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Dad walked Emily down the aisle, his steps slow and careful, his face drawn but composed. Andrew stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his expression unreadable. He watched Emily approach with eyes that revealed nothing. My chest ached in a way I hadn't expected. Despite everything, despite the fraud and the lies and the decades of being treated like I didn't matter, seeing my family together without me still hurt, they looked perfect. Complete. Like the family photo I'd never been centered in. I was reaching for the X to close the stream when the officiant began. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." A phone buzzed, loud enough that the microphone picked it up. Andrew reached into his pocket. The officiant paused, clearly thrown. Guests shifted uncomfortably. You didn't check your phone during your own wedding ceremony. It was so wildly inappropriate that several people gasped. Emily's eyes went wide. I could see her mouth moving, probably whispering for him to put it away, but Andrew ignored her completely. He pulled out his phone and stared at the screen, his thumb scrolling. His expression changed as I watched. Confusion first, his eyebrows drawing together. Then shock, his mouth opening slightly. Then something cold and hard settled over his features, transforming him into someone frightening. He looked up at Emily. "Did you know about this?" His voice carried through the microphone the officiant was still holding. Every guest could hear him. Emily's voice was shaky, scared. "Know about what?" Andrew turned his phone around, held it up so she could see the screen. "This." I couldn't see what was playing from the live stream angle, but I knew. I knew exactly what she was seeing. Herself and Nathan in that parking garage. The kiss, the intimacy, the betrayal captured in high definition. The guests in the front row could see the screen. Someone gasped. Another person stood up, craning to see better. "Who sent this?" Andrew's voice was eerily calm, the kind of calm that precedes violence. Emily's face had gone white. "I don't know, When was this video taken? It's not what it looks like." Andrew laughed, and the sound was bitter, sharp enough to cut. "Not what it looks like? You're kissing Nathan Pierce, my business partner. The man who's been blackmailing your mother for 10 years. The man I've been laundering money for." The crowd erupted. Confused murmurs, shocked exclamations, people turning to their neighbors, asking if they'd heard that right. Emily stammered, You knew about Nathan and my mom?" Andrew stepped closer to her, and she took a step back, her massive dress rustling. "I've known everything from the beginning. Your mother came to me 2 years ago. Desperate. Explained the whole sordid story about her past, about Nathan, about the blackmail. I needed a respectable family to rehabilitate my reputation after that lawsuit. She needed money to pay off her blackmailer and cover up her daughter's credit card fraud." He looked out at the crowd. This wedding was never about love. It was a business transaction. I marry into a good family, get social legitimacy. She gets money. Nathan gets paid. Everyone wins. Emily was crying now, tears streaming down her face and ruining her makeup. Then why are you angry? You knew I didn't love you. Andrew's expression hardened into something cruel. Because I controlled the narrative. I controlled when this ended and how it ended, but someone sent this email and now everything is public. The fraud, the laundering, the blackmail, all of it's going to come out. You've ruined my exit strategy. He turned like he was going to walk away. Emily reached for him. Andrew, please. He turned back and slapped her across the face. The sound cracked through the microphone. Sharp, clean, deliberate. Emily stumbled backward more from shock than force and collapsed onto the ground in a pool of white fabric. The crowd screamed. Phones came out everywhere, dozens of them, all pointed at the altar. The live stream shook as the bridesmaid holding the phone gasped. Andrew grabbed his jacket from where it hung on a chair, shrugged it on with perfect composure, and walked down the aisle. Guests scrambled out of his way. He didn't look back. Mom rushed to Emily, dropping to her knees in her expensive dress. Dad stood frozen at the side of the altar, his face gray. The officiant had dropped his microphone. And I sat in my apartment watching it all unfold on a screen and realized what I'd just witnessed. The slap wasn't rage. It wasn't a man losing control because his bride had cheated on him. It was calculated. It was theater. Andrew had positioned himself as the victim, the wronged groom who'd been betrayed by a lying bride. When the authorities came for him, when the investigation into his money laundering started, he'd point to this moment. He'd say he was manipulated, used, that he'd married into a criminal family without knowing the full extent of their corruption. He didn't slap her out of rage. He slapped the illusion and made sure everyone was watching. The live stream ended abruptly, the bridesmaid probably too shocked to keep filming. But it didn't matter. The damage was already done, and it was spreading faster than I could have imagined. I refreshed Instagram and watched in real time as the video multiplied. Different angles, different guests, all uploading the same moment from their seats. The slap heard around the internet. Within 30 seconds, it was on TikTok. Within a minute, Twitter, Facebook. Every social media platform simultaneously exploding with the same 15-second clip. #WeddingSlap started trending before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. I watched the number climb. 100,000 views. 500,000. 1 million. The news outlets picked it up within 20 minutes, their headlines competing for the most sensational angle. Groom slaps bride at altar after cheating scandal. Wedding turns violent in front of 200 guests. Shocking video man attacks bride over affair allegations. By 5 o'clock, 1 hour after the ceremony that never was the video, had 10 million views. The comments section was a war zone. People debating whether it was assault, whether Emily deserved it, whether Andrew was justified. TikTok lawyers were already analyzing the legal implications, breaking down assault charges and self-defense claims, and whether emotional distress constituted provocation. Someone had made a meme. Multiple someones, actually. Andrew's company website had crashed from the traffic surge of people trying to find out who he was. Emily's Instagram was being flooded with comments so fast I couldn't read them all. Thousands per minute, a mix of support and condemnation and morbid curiosity. My phone rang. Mom. I stared at her name on the screen for 3 rings before I answered. Some part of me knew what was coming, but I answered anyway. She was screaming before I could even say hello. What did you do? What did you do to your sister? I kept my voice level calm, even though my hands were shaking. I didn't do anything. I wasn't even there. Someone sent Andrew videos of Emily videos from months ago. Someone has been stalking her, recording her, watching her. And that someone is you. Mom, I don't... He hit her. In front of 200 people, in front of everyone we know. She's humiliated. Her life is destroyed, and it's your fault. The line went dead. I sat there holding my phone, the silence ringing in my ears, and then the texts started. Aunt Carol, who I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. How could you do this to your own sister? Cousin Michael, always knew you were jealous of Emily. This is sick. Uncle Robert, you should be ashamed of yourself. People I barely remembered, distant relatives who'd never bothered to reach out when I got divorced, or when I bought my condo, or during any of the milestones in my life that actually mattered. But now they had opinions. Now they had judgment. Now they knew exactly who was to blame. The family narrative had formed in under an hour. I was the villain, the jealous older sister who couldn't stand to see Emily happy, who'd sabotaged her wedding, who'd ruined everything out of spite. None of them knew about the identity theft, the credit card fraud, the blackmail, the money laundering, the conspiracy that had been built on my destroyed credit and Dad's silence. My phone started ringing with unknown numbers. I let them go to voicemail. Then the emails started coming to my work address, which meant someone had done their research. Ms. Morrison, I'm a reporter with Channel 7 News. We understand you're the bride's sister and weren't in attendance at the wedding. Can you comment on the family dynamics that may have led to this situation? Rachel, this is Jennifer Park from the Metro Daily. Sources close to the family say there's been a long history of rivalry between you and your sister. Would you be willing to share your perspective, Ms. Morrison? Did you have any knowledge of your sister's alleged affair before the wedding? Were you aware of the videos that were sent to the groom? I blocked the numbers, deleted the emails, took a screenshot of one particularly invasive message, and actually laughed, though the sound came out bitter and sharp. They wanted me to comment on a rivalry. They wanted to know about family dynamics. They had no idea. The real story, the actual truth about what had led to that slap, would break the internet into pieces. But I stayed silent. By 7 o'clock that evening, Andrew had scrubbed his entire online presence. Every social media account deleted or deactivated. His phone going straight to voicemail. His company released a statement through their PR firm brief and carefully worded, Mr. Chen deeply regrets his actions today and is seeking professional counseling. He will not be making further statements at this time, and we ask that his privacy be respected during this difficult period. Professional. Distant. Exactly what you'd expect from someone trying to control the narrative. Emily, however, took a different approach. At 8 p.m., she posted a photo on Instagram. Herself still in that $15,000 wedding dress sitting on the floor of her childhood bedroom at Mom's house. Her makeup was ruined, mascara streaked down her face, her hair falling out of its elaborate style. The dress pooled around her like a collapsed cloud. The caption read, I don't even know how to process what happened today. I'm heartbroken, humiliated, and betrayed. To whoever sent those videos, you didn't save me. You destroyed me. I hope you're happy. I watched the likes climb. 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 in 2 hours. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. You deserve so much better. That man belongs in jail. Press charges, honey. This is abuse, plain and simple. Stay strong, beautiful. No one knew that Emily was lying. No one knew that she'd already seen the email, that she'd deleted it from Andrew's laptop, that she'd known what was coming. No one knew that she'd agreed to this sham wedding, that she'd been having an affair with Nathan, that she'd participated in fraud and deception at every level. And watching her perform this grief, this public victimhood that was garnering her more sympathy and attention than she'd ever had in her life, I realized something. Emily had always been good at playing the victim. It was her greatest skill. 35 years of practice had perfected it. They thought this was about a slap. They thought it was a simple story of a bride betrayed and a groom who lost control. It was about survival. And I was about to find out who would survive what I knew. 2 days after the wedding. I went back to work because sitting in my apartment watching the video rack up views felt like slow torture. I needed normalcy, needed to focus on spreadsheets and quarterly reports and things that made sense. Things that followed logical rules instead of spiraling into chaos. I was reviewing a client portfolio when the email from Jake arrived. Subject line, "You were right to be worried." I glanced around my cubicle to make sure no one was looking over my shoulder, then opened it. The report was 43 pages long. I scrolled through the executive summary. First, my trained eye picking out the key facts the way I'd skim a financial statement, looking for red flags. Nathan Miller, born November 1986, to Melissa Miller, a woman with documented substance abuse issues. Child removed by CPS at age 3 after being found alone in an apartment for 2 days. Placed in foster care. Bounced between 6 different homes before landing at Harrison County Foster Home at age 11. The same foster home where my mother, then Linda Cartwright, had lived from age 11 to 18. Jake had attached scanned documents, old photographs from the foster home, the kind institutions take for their records. I clicked on the first one. A group photo from 1985, 15 kids standing in front of a large house that had probably seen better days. The image quality was poor, faded with age, but I could make out faces. In the back row, a girl with my mother's features unmistakable even at 16. Dark hair, sharp cheekbones, that particular way she held her mouth like she was perpetually disappointed. Next to her stood a boy around 11, lanky and uncomfortable. Nathan. They were standing close together, not touching, but close. The next photo made my breath catch. Mom again, maybe a year later, 17 according to the date stamp. She was wearing an oversized sweatshirt, but even through the baggy fabric I could see what Jake's note confirmed: she was heavily pregnant. The medical records were attached as PDFs. Linda Cartwright admitted to County General Hospital, March 1986. Live birth, male infant 7 pounds 2 ounces. Mother declined to name father. Baby surrendered to state custody for adoption. Closed adoption finalized June 1986. I sat back in my chair trying to process what I was reading. Dad had told me about the pregnancy, about the baby given up for adoption. But seeing it documented, seeing the actual proof in grainy photographs and faded medical forms, made it devastatingly real. The next section of Jake's report made my stomach turn. Per your request, I obtained DNA samples from items in Nathan Pierce's trash. Legally dubious methodology, but you didn't hear that from me. Compared samples with genealogy databases. Results indicate Nathan Pierce is biologically the grandson of James and Dorothy Cartwright, your maternal grandparents. Combined with the foster care records and birth certificate, the conclusion was inescapable. Nathan Pierce was Nathan Miller Jr., biological son of Linda Cartwright, and Nathan Miller Sr., both teenage foster children. The baby given up for adoption in 1986. He'd found his birth records at age 28, tracked down his biological mother, and had been blackmailing her for the past 10 years. Which meant Nathan wasn't just some man blackmailing my mother. He was her son, Emily's half-brother. The implications crashed over me like a wave of ice water. Emily had been sleeping with Nathan. Emily, who didn't know who couldn't have known, had been having an affair with her own half-brother. I barely made it to the bathroom before I vomited. I stayed there for 5 minutes, forehead pressed against the cool tile wall, trying to get my breathing under control. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. This was beyond anything I'd imagined. This wasn't just fraud and blackmail and money laundering. This was something darker, more twisted, more deliberately cruel than I could have conceived. Did Nathan know? He had to. He'd found his birth records tracked down. Mom knew exactly who he was targeting when he showed up 10 years ago demanding money. Which meant when he seduced Emily, when he started that affair, he knew. He knew she was his half-sister. He'd done it on purpose. I stumbled back to my desk, grabbed my phone with hands that still trembled, and called Dad.